Good evening and welcome to the September 22nd, 2020 Planning Board meeting. As a preliminary matter, this is John Plummer, Chair of the Planning Board. With me, I have Josh Morris and David Fields as support staff from the town's planning division. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Jim Sears. Okay, I see Jim did that.
Yeah.
Okay, Peg Zielinski.
I'm here.
Lou George.
Yep, here.
Marie Adler.
Here.
Great. Staff, Josh Morris.
I am here.
David Fields.
Present.
And Josh, if I can ask you to ask for the roll call for the people who are speaking, at least for 188 Elliott Street, that would be helpful.
Yep. I do not, the public or the development team, or is that who you're asking? Is that what you're saying, Josh?
Yeah, whoever's going to be presenting on behalf of 188 Elliott Street.
Okay. Yep. So it's Mr. Chris Broyles. He is here. Yep, I see him. Yep.
I'm here.
Yep.
Hey, Chris. Okay, good.
Hello.
Good evening. Okay, great. Good evening. This is an open meeting of the Danvers Planning Board, and it's being conducted remotely consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted on the town's website, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comments. For this meeting, the Planning Board is convening remotely via the WebEx app as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. Supporting materials that have been provided members of this body and will be shown during this transmission. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. Meeting ground rules. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comments, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called further. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to converse with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. For items with public comment, we have established an email address with public comments at danversmass.gov. This email address is shown online with the streaming of this meeting. Residents may email comments, and they will provide it read out loud after the staff has confirmed their name and address. All emails must contain the date and phrase Planning Board in the subject line. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. Excuse me. I just want to let the board members know that Nathaniel Sears has resigned his spot as the associate member for personal reasons, and I just want to, behalf of the board to thank Nat for all his service and wish him nothing but good health moving forward. So why don't I turn to 188 Elliott Street, request for approval of a major modification to an approved site plan submitted by Christ the Redeemer Church for property at 188 Elliott Street. The applicant proposes to expand the church facility and associated site modifications. Danvers Assessors Map 53, Lot 218, Beverly East Assessors Map 28, Lot 5. So I'll turn the floor to the folks from the Christ of the Redeemer Church.
Hi, yes, this is Chris. This is Chris Broyles from Green Associates.
Go ahead, Chris.
Oh, that sounds bad. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay. Something sounds really weird to me on my end. Okay, so sorry about that. Let me share the latest plans that we submitted to engineering. Okay. Can you see my plan?
We can.
Okay. So the last time we were in front of you was on August 25th, and the outstanding items were to discuss the outstanding items with engineering. They had a comment letter about various items. And so we were going to coordinate with engineering on their comments. We sent them a plan before the September 8th planning board meeting, but it was not in time to be on that agenda. They then reviewed the plans, they reviewed our response to their comments, and they issued a response letter to us. All of their comments they had, we addressed, with the exception of one item, which we had a follow-up phone call with them to discuss, and they were okay with it being a condition as part of the approval. The items that were changed from the last set of plans were we looked at the sewer tie-in, and the sewer tie-in used to tie into to the right of the property into a sewer line that would then go into Elliott Street. We looked at the elevations and determined we needed to tie into Elliott Street. We also looked at adding a fire protection water line, and then we also looked at the subsurface infiltration system, or should say detention system. We rotated that and pushed it a little farther from Elliott Street to get some inverts to work. So there were very minor edits. And so the outstanding items were going over the comments with engineering, which again they had said we met all their comments, and then we also met with a couple of butters on August 31st and talked to them about their issues, which were mostly related to the stormwater runoff. So those were kind of the two items that were outstanding from the last planning board meeting that we attended. So this in front of you is the plan that we submitted to engineering, and they signed off with. So that's kind of it.
Okay. Jim, why don't we start with you tonight?
I don't have any questions, any further questions, Sean, from our last meeting. Thank you.
Okay. Peg?
Sorry, had to unmute. I don't have any either. My only concern is when they have overflow at Christmas or Easter, keeping the parking off of Elliott Street in the street. I know they said they're going to put up signs and maybe park in Danversport Yacht Club, but I don't think they have an agreement with Danversport to do that.
They do not have
anyone saying that they did.
No, I don't think they have an official agreement, but I believe they have used them possibly in the past, and they're in works with, formalizing an agreement. But yes, you're correct. There's no official agreement between the two.
Was the change in the drainage sufficient to eliminate water to the, I think it was the abutter across the street that wrote the letter the other day?
Yes, so, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's it.
So what I was going to say was the change in the drainage was one of the comments from engineering was to provide more total suspended solids, like sediment removal from the site. So we added what was, I think we discussed this a little bit at the last meeting, what's called an isolator row. Let me move to the details. It's basically this, in this first chamber system is wrapped and it collects sediment as opposed, it just collects sediment. And so, and then the water will infiltrate through the actual filter fabric into the other chambers, and it'll, go from there. So what happened was when we made that change, we just needed to move some of the a manhole around, and that kind of reorganized the location a little bit. So the location is actually a little bit of a better spot. It's pushed farther from Elliott Street. So there was that's all we did. We just kind of pushed it. We moved it. So the drainage system has always been providing, has been capturing the post runoff more efficiently than the existing conditions, and it's also meeting or reducing, all the peaks and all the volumes off the site. And that was the abutter's concern, was one of the outfalls that's behind his house, that we weren't going to be increasing the runoff to that spot. And, we're actually reducing the actual overland flow into Elliott Street. And that's something that engineering was discussed with us as well. And so, we discussed that with them. And we are reducing the flow, like overland flow into Elliott Street, because we're capturing it all more efficiently on site.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
Okay, thanks, Peg. Tori?
Yeah, my concern is also the drainage, and we got some correspondence from town engineering. I remember last time I'd asked whether they were comfortable with the impact on the Elliott Street drainage systems. And this question is for town staff. I'm not sure I'm interpreting their communication correctly, but it seemed like they were okay with it. I didn't see any objection based on the capacity of the Elliott Street drain. Does that sound like a correct interpretation of engineering's comments?
Yeah, sorry. David, you can respond if you'd like, or I can.
No, go for it, Josh.
I was just going to say, in correspondence with engineering, it does seem from their perspective or their opinion that they're comfortable with the proposal and the stormwater system along Elliott Street.
Okay, given that, I don't have any further concerns.
Okay, Lou?
Yeah, just a couple of quick notes. One question I did, there was some additional correspondence, that addressed engineering comments, as well as the, noted the abutters concerns, as well as the waiver issues. And just to make sure, just so I'm clarifying it, there were 2 letters and they were dated August 24th, but it seems like it looks like that was a typographical. It looks like they went out actually September 1st. Is that correct?
It's possible. I know that we were shuffling to get things out the door very fast, and it's possible that we mistyped a date. I know that in one case, like the plans, are dated August 31st, but by the time we delivered them, it was like 3 or 4 days later. So it's like, so it could have been something like that.
That's fine. I was just a little bit confused because it referred to dates that would have taken place in the future. So.
Got it.
So, but turning on that though, just I know one of the points at our last, and I think the sort of the stormwater and drainage concerns, I think I'm satisfied with, with what you've discussed so far. I know that at our last meeting, and I think you've alluded to it at the last meeting, I believe it was an abutter, Mr. Andrus was, yes. Apparently there'd been some communication problem, and so that he was not able to go for, to attend a sort of a site visit. That did take place?
Yes, so that's the meeting we had on August 31st.
Okay.
After the planning board meeting. So we met with him and another abutter. I think her name was Mary Ann as well. She also attended.
Okay.
So that was, yeah, so we met with him on that date.
So were there any outstanding concerns after that meeting?
His big concern was the drainage.
Okay.
So we went over that with him. He also discussed some of the landscaping as well, and we had said there was no formal landscaping plan at this point, but there will be, they will be doing some landscaping, for the building. But he was mostly concerned about the stormwater. So, and we addressed his concern, because basically it's just we reduced the flow off the site.
Okay. Okay. Very good. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Lou. My questions have already been asked and answered, so I'll turn it over to Josh. Is anyone from the public interested in speaking on this application?
Yes, there is one. There's one member from the public, Mr. John Almeida. I believe had contacted our office. He's in the meeting right now. He's on mute right now, but I believe that he wanted to. Yeah, okay, he just unmuted. I believe that he wanted to talk about this matter.
Okay, go ahead, sir. We'll yield the floor to you.
Thank you.
Can you
Mr.
just identify yourself and the address for the minutes?
Yes, this is John Almeida, Precinct 3 Town Meeting member. I live at 4 Eden Glen Ave, the top of Eden Glen. I just want to reiterate a comment I made at the last meeting, and that is if there's a way that the board could, the request that's come before you is a building that would be used basically for Sunday school during services. My concern is that it not turn into something more than that, which might have traffic impacts during the week. So if there's any way that you could circumscribe the authorization that's being provided such that it is for a building with this type of use, meaning during the church services, I think that would ease some concern I have about what happens, 6 months from now, a year, if the use changes. Thank you.
You're welcome. I believe that was addressed the last meeting. So Josh, I don't have it off the top of my head, but I thought what the application was pretty specific about the use. Do you want to comment on that question?
Sure. So I think the issue or question, if I'm right, is the question about if the kind of nursery or childcare during church services, and the concern about potentially becoming a child, like a private childcare facility.
Yep.
I believe that once again that use is also protected under the Dover Amendment. But I do believe that if it was to become more of a private child care center, that it would have to come back to the planning board for review, at least from a site plan situation just like this, just to at least review and discuss the operations and circulation of a use if it was to become that. I'm not sure if David has anything else to add, but that would be my comment on that question.
Hi, Mr. Chair. This is David here. I don't have anything more to add other than just to note that, like, I think we discussed this last time. If the use were to change in some way, the building inspector would forward the plans to us, and they'd have to submit a new application for a full change in use. So Josh is correct on that.
Yeah, that's what I remembered. Any other comments or coming in from the public through email? David or Josh?
I have not received anything via email tonight.
Yes, I've also not received any communications or correspondence with the public on this matter.
Okay. Given that, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
I move that we close the public hearing on 188 Elliott Street.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, just do the roll call vote. Jim Sears,
Yes.
Peg Zielinski,
Yes.
Lou George,
Yes.
Tori Adler,
Yes.
And the chair's in favor of closing the public hearing. So now I'll turn it over to the motion for approval of the major modification to the approved site plan submitted by the Christ the Redeemer Church for property at 188 Elliott Street. The applicant is proposing to expand the church facility and associate site modifications. Is there a motion to approve the major modification as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Oops, I'm sorry.
Okay, who, was that you, Lou? Just for the
Okay.
minutes? Okay, so we have a first and a second. Roll call vote. Jim?
Yes.
Peg Zelinski?
Yes,
Lou George?
Yes.
Tori Adler?
Yes.
And the chair's in favor of it as well. So good luck to the applicant.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
The next public hearing, there's really two matters for 13 Essex Street. What I'd like to do is read both of the public hearings continuation into the record, and then we'll start with a presentation from the appropriate individuals at 13 Essex Street. So the first is a request for site plan approval submitted by Errol Kerry for property at 13 Essex Street pursuant to Section 4 of the zoning bylaw. Said property is in the Danvers Town Center Live Work District, DTC L/W zoning district. The applicant is proposing additional parking on this site. Assessors map 43, lot 423. The second request for a special permit and site plan approval submitted by Errol Kerry for property at 13 Essex Street pursuant to section 18.4.c, 18.5.d.6.c, 18.13, and section 4 of the zoning bylaw. Said property is in the Danvers Town Center Live/Work District, zoning district, assessors map 43, lot 423. So Josh, is all those who are speaking on behalf of 13 Essex Street, the applicant, available?
Yes, it's a team. So it's Mr. Larry Graham, who just unmuted, which was great, and Mr. Bill Nolan is showing us putting the plans up, which is great. It looks like the team is ready to discuss 13 Essex Street.
Mr. Chairman, Larry Graham, am I recognized to begin? Mr. Chairman, Larry Graham, am I recognized to begin presentation?
Looks like we lost John's audio momentarily. I think he's going to log back in. Hang tight, everyone.
Okay. While we're waiting, does everyone else hear me? Larry Graham?
I can hear you, Larry.
Okay.
I can hear you.
Okay, very good.
I can hear you.
Thank you.
Sorry, folks, this is John. So, hey, Jim, if I lose connection, can you just take over the meeting and when I have to sign back in? Can folks hear me now?
Sure thing, John.
Okay. So I apologize. For whatever reason, this app is unstable for me. So, so I'll just turn it over to the applicant to make their presentation.
Thank you, Chairman Farmer. Larry Graham, H.L. Graham Associates of Ipswich. And with us this evening is Bill Nolan, the architect for the project. I'm the civil site engineer, prepared the site plan, the two-sheet site plan, and Bill has prepared the architectural plans. And I'll lead off with the initial discussion and then turn it over to Bill. We've been before the board several meetings now. We were last before the board on August 11th when we were continued to this evening's meeting. Prior to the August 11th meeting, we were before the board on July 14th. In both of those meetings, we were presenting a 5-unit plan for the property. Between those two meetings, we worked through a lot of details and so forth with engineering, some with planning, and at the at the July 14th meeting, and prior to working through those details, we had received a lot of real positive comments from the planning board. At the August 11th meeting, there was considerable comments with persons, abutters and other persons of interest in opposition to the 5-unit plan. At that particular meeting as well, and near the end of it, the planning board chair called for somewhat of a straw vote. And unfortunately, we read that to be that most of the members would not support the 5-unit plan that we had presented. Obviously, we were disappointed to hear that. Our client was disappointed because we felt we had something with respect to our plans and application that the planning board was seemingly in favor of. As such, and nevertheless, we went back to a discussion, had several meetings with the client, and started to consider how we were going to modify the 5-unit plan and resubmit. We gave some consideration to modifying that 5-unit plan to a 4-unit plan. Didn't spend too long a time discussing that, decided that even with that modification, we would still need to add on this building in the back, several stories likely, and probably not meet or be able to address the opposition that was expressed on August 11th. So with that, we decided to just pull back to a 3-unit plan, which is what we've submitted to the board and is what we're discussing tonight. The first thing that we realized when we went from the 5 to the 3 units was that we were no longer considered under the character-based zoning district a multifamily project or multifamily dwelling. We fell into a category in the new bylaw called a paired house. So 3 units is a paired house under that new bylaw. We looked at whether or not we needed a special permit, and we do. We do need a special permit density. The paired house density by right would allow us to have 2.7 units. The paired density, the paired house density by special permit would allow us to have 3.5 units. So we are still requesting of the board a special permit for density, and we also have with the board, as the chair just read, I believe the special permit application from the 5-unit plan that would roll over to the 3-unit plan. We are also proposing in this new 3-unit plan tandem parking, as you'll see when we look at the plan, so that we do need and are requesting the same special permit as we did before for tandem parking. If we could now go to sheet 1 of the plans, this is the existing condition plan and it does show some demolition notes on it, TBR, to be removed, indicating a number of things on that sheet that would generally be removed to implement the proposed work. The major revisions on this sheet were on the right-hand side of the sheet under the parking notes and the residential density notes. Those notes were revised with respect to the change from 5 to 3 units and the change from multifamily to the paired house. We meet, as you'll see in that second table there, all the lot standards for the paired house in the new zone, with the exception of the build-to-zone facade build-out and the side setbacks. And there's a notation there in the table and on the plan indicating that we are still proposing to request a waiver for those pre-existing nonconformities under Section 18(6)G of the bylaw. If we could now go to sheet 2, and if I'm going, if anyone wants to interrupt, I'll certainly talk to any questions, or we'll come back to them.
Okay, just go ahead with your presentation, then we'll ask the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. On sheet 2 of 2, it shows that what we are now proposing is to remove the garage that was the further appendage to the main structure to the north. We're now proposing to remove that garage and otherwise maintain the footprint of the existing dwelling. And that includes the addition on the back of the dwelling that's between the garage that now exists and the primary larger dwelling, footprint of the dwelling. We are proposing to add a story to that dwelling, and I'll let Bill Nolan talk to that in a bit when he gets to the architectural part. We are adding proposing the required parking for 3 units of 2 or more bedrooms of 2 parking spaces per unit. So in the back of the property, after the garage is removed, you'll see 6 parking spaces. We also have a 7th space, which is street side, which is allowed under the bylaw. That's an extra space, but we've labeled it as a guest. It could probably be a couple out there, a couple of parking spaces out there, but they wouldn't necessarily meet the dimensional requirements of the bylaw. The parking in the back, I would like to add, that's an increase in pavement of about 650 square feet. And as you can see on the plan, 2 of those required spaces, 2 of the units would have tandem parking. The other would have side-by-side parking. We're proposing the same landscape treatment in the front of the building as well as along the left side. We are now also toward the rear of the building with now having more room to get our parking in. We've now got a 5-foot green buffer space around all 3 sides of the rear of the property. To the grading and drainage, we are now basically allowing a minimal high point to project down through the center of the lot in the back here where the parking and the green space and drainage is. And we will grade a minimal grading out to 2 catch basins now instead of 1, which was on the previous plan. There's a catch basin in both the northwest corner as well as in the northeast corner of a wood edging, which is proposed to basically enclose that rear green space beyond the parking. We also incorporated the same number of infiltrators that we had on the 5-unit plan, but we did eliminate a water quality tank that we had on the 5-unit plan. If you look and compare them both, we don't need that any longer because we've got the green space between the paved area and the catch basins for filtration. That is generally the change to the grading and drainage. I do want to emphasize again that we have the same capacity of infiltration proposed that we did for the 5-unit plan, with much less coverage of green space with impervious surfaces. So we've increased the green space both within that proposed timber edging as well as the 5-foot outside of the timber edging. In all, the green space has been significantly increased over the 5-unit plan. And just to give a few examples of that, the building went from 30 feet to 57 feet, and in the rear of the property from the previously proposed building to the northerly property line was previously 30, it's now 57. And the parking was previously 12, and it's now 25. So we've significantly, on the order of double that dimensional setbacks of parking and building to the northerly property line. Lastly, last Tuesday, we had a teleconference with engineering. We came to an agreement with respect to this submittal this evening. I wrote a letter that to the planning department that captured the 8 or 9 items that engineering was happy with to have submitted to them prior to the planning board endorsing any plans. We would do that after approval, after hopeful approval, but prior to endorsement. And that letter is on record with the planning department. With that, I would either, Mr. Chairman, take questions now on the civil site engineering or turn it over to the architect, Bill Nolan, let him make his presentation and put off.
Yeah, why don't we have Bill make his presentation? Mr. Nolan?
Thank you.
Yep, can everybody hear me?
We can.
Great. Thank you. So I'll try to be brief here and reiterate some of the things that Larry said. We're going to stay on the existing footprint for this building. In fact, we're actually proposing to remove the existing garage there, so the footprint in effect is actually getting smaller. I think Larry misspoke in one aspect, in that we are not proposing to add an additional level to this back piece here. So I just wanted to clarify that. And I also wanted to clarify one other difference in our plans. So this is a model that we build, and then save dimensional images so you can get the sense. We can explain heights. I didn't build a recycling storage that we're proposing. You'll see that on the site plan in the next page. But just so that you're aware of that, we're going to propose a small covered structure in this area, house recycling, trash, things like that. And it's not showing on these elevations. We'll show you the plan. It's a small single-story structure, open sides. So what we are proposing, I think the major difference here is we're asking to go up in the height of the roof, and I'll explain why in a minute. Essentially, the bottom line of this red right here is the existing profile, and we're looking to build the end walls up a little bit so we can get some natural light, and as well as a nice unit up in this attic area up here. the existing mean roof, just to give you a sense, is at elevation 28.5, and we're proposing that the new mean roof go to elevation 34, which is a difference of about 5.5 feet. As it was described before, just for people that might be looking at this for the first time, the bylaw looks at roof height, the mean elevation, so the average point of the roof, not the peak of the roof or the ridge of the roof. Just to give you a comparison, the difference between ridges, here's your existing ridge, here's your proposed ridge, is about 4.5 feet. Okay, so we're well within the maximum height allowed by the bylaws. A paired house has a height of maximum height of 40 feet. I just want to reiterate that is to the mean roof. We're below that by a few feet at our highest point, so we're significantly under that. There is some language in here, section 18-17E, that deals with building step back and street enclosures. I'm not sure if this applies, but if it does, in figure 18-18, building setbacks, we're between 20 feet and 30 feet for this district. That allows, it suggests or reduces the max building height to 35. So we're still under that, and I'm not even 100% sure that that applies. But if it does, we're still under that by a foot to the mean height roof. So this would be the, sorry, I lost track here. This would be the front elevation right here. The red profiles the square footage, if you will, that we're adding on top of the house. This would be the driveway side of the house, or right if you're looking at it from the street. And you can see up here, this is the increased height here. This is marked in red here was the former garage that we're removing, and you'll see here that we are proposing no additional height on this back piece right here. We kept the decks in. There will be a deck for each unit. This is the first unit, second unit, third unit. Rear of the house here, again, this is the garage that's being removed. This is the existing structure back there. We're keeping the form as it is. And this is the back, where we're building up the existing sidewalls, again, in order to create, to get some natural light in there, windows in there. And last elevation would be the left side elevation. Again, moved garage, existing, and then here's the addition that we're adding on top. I have some photos of the existing structure, and hopefully that will explain a little bit about why we're asking to increase the volume up on this on the third floor or the attic level. Are you able to see this photograph?
Not yet. It hasn't. Yes.
Oh, no.
We can. Yep.
Okay, great. All right. So this is an existing photo of what the attic level looks like currently, and you'll see here at the end walls right here. That's just under 2 feet in this. You'll see that this is the existing structure, and given the age of the building, it's not uncommon to see quite a bit of manipulation throughout the year. So you can start to see that here. But this is a cross section through the middle of the building. This is looking at one of the end walls, and I picked this intentionally because it shows the two different conditions here that we'd going to be forced into doing if we were going to provide natural light up here. This is that dormer off to the left-hand face, and you'll see the window here. It's a small window, but it's a normal size window. You see how close it is to the floor, and this is an unfinished floor. So we're about 8 inches off of the floor. By code, this would need to be tempered glass because it's too low. And you can see here that this is probably about a 4-foot window. Doesn't give you much space in order to get some natural light in here. Other way to do it is through these skylights right here, but that offers very little in terms of true ventilation and vision out there, natural light. The other part that I wanted to show you here is the existing structure too. This is about 3 feet and potentially even a little bit more. So this doesn't even come close to meeting today's standards in terms of construction. So it's an inferior roof construction. It's an existing, it obviously hasn't fallen down, but I wouldn't be able to build this at today's standards. So to get and there's 2 parts to that. There's the structural capacity of the roof, but there's also the cavity of the roof too, which is our main form of insulation. We would not be able to meet the regulations, the energy code, filling this cavity, even with the most advanced insulation out there. So one way to do that would be to build down, and we'd lose even more square footage up there. This is, I think, a pretty telling image. Oops, sorry. This is down the center of the building, and this is at its widest point. This is at the front of the building, where it's at its widest. This is a door virtually right under the ridge, right in the center of the building, and that is a normal door. And if you go over about a foot, we can no longer get a normal door. So it really restricts the ability to create, decent spaces up there. This, is a closet at this point, but we're also looking at this potentially a bathroom in here, and you can see the head height issues that we're going to run into. I think that might be it. Pictures. So that's currently what we're working with, and the reason why we felt strongly that it was, a benefit to the property, a benefit to the future, tenant up here, to be able to give them some more space, make it a nicer unit, and get some natural light in there, plus meet the design standards by today's construction methods. Back to the plans. Are you seeing the plans now?
We are.
Okay, great. Here is site plan, and I'm going to reiterate a lot of what Larry said. This is the existing site plan right here. We are proposing more parking back there to meet the parking regulations, but we're trying to preserve as much green space as we can back there. All the improvements on the front that we were proposing in the 5-unit building, we're carrying over. So the addition of a street tree, leaving the existing trees that are on the property defining this edge with some gardens in front, and then as much garden as we can get along the side here. This red box, right here denotes the addition of the front porch and corresponding decks per floor. And this small rectangle right here, we can't read the text, but this is what we're proposing to be a recycling cover, a place to put trash barrels and recycling. That's optional. We thought it was good for the project, good for the town, good for the tenants and the neighborhood, so we included it in there. If the board felt strongly that less is more, then this is up for debate. And lastly, I probably won't spend too much time on the floor plans. The existing unit on the first floor remains essentially identical. We've done a couple little modifications to improve the unit, but the square footage stays the same. The amount of bedrooms or spaces stay the same. There's a little bit of work in here in the kitchen area, but the staircase stays pretty much the same. So effectively, it's the same unit that exists today. Same is true largely for the second floor plan. This additional bedroom right now is an existing space. You step down to it, and because of that, this is a little bit smaller of a structure, height-wise. The only big major change on this second floor is the addition of a new staircase up to the attic unit. The attic unit is this would be the new space. here. You can see 3 bedrooms, 2. These essentially exist right now. They're cropped significantly though with the form of the roof. If our proposal goes through, then we can get actual windows in there, you know, and some natural light and ventilation. And as you can see, it's a nice unit. It's a fairly modest unit too. Here's their staircase down, and then each unit would have a private deck that would be, you know, allow them to go outside. So how do we achieve all that? Essentially, we're raising the ridge up a little bit. We've kept the existing detailing for the front, so we think it matches the aesthetic of the existing house, and we're effectively creating the extra space up there with the appearance of these shed dormers that run pretty much the length of the building. They're held back a little bit, and again, that allows us to get these full height windows in there, and it also allows us to construct this top with today's standards and get the appropriate insulation values in there. I'd be happy to expound on anything if you have any questions, but I think that's the extent. Last thing down here, you'll see in this bottom, just a quick summary of what we're proposing to do here. A lot of this is review, reducing down from 5 units to 3 units, reducing the scale of the building, and maintaining the existing footprint. And I would add that we're actually reducing the existing footprint and preserving as much green space as we possibly can. I think the increase between our previous 5-unit scheme to 3-unit scheme is about 715 square feet of additional green space. And we were able to do that by reducing the parking requirements from 9 to 6, when 5 is really only needed. So I think that's the extent of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so Lou, why don't we start with you?
Sure. There's a few questions I have. First of all, with respect to, this is more, I guess, an engineering question, I guess, with respect to the parking. So I noticed that the parking is, if I recall from the 5-unit configuration, some of the parking was actually covered parking. I believe it was covered, it was under garage. So now this parking appears to be more, you know, appears to be outside. Is there any, I guess a question I had relates to impervious surface and any sort of runoff issues. I know that the drainage is the same, is my understanding, as for the 5-unit, but is there any, I guess what I'm wondering is what's the difference between the parking for this most recent proposal versus what was existing before, and sort of the effects on the drainage?
Yeah, this is Larry Graham. I'll address that. The 5-unit plan, as you recall, had a fairly large extension addition on the back of the existing primary structure. And with that addition and beneath it, we were able to put 6 parking spaces under that structure. We can't do that now because we're staying on the existing footprint. So we don't have that ability to have the parking underneath the structure. So we have the 6 required spaces shown here. It does involve about 650 square feet of additional pavement to have those spaces beyond the existing pavement. And and all of the drainage off of that parking, to get directly to your point, will be captured by the edging, which we're proposing 5 feet off the property line all around that back section of the property, and directed to the catch basins I referenced in the northwest and northeast corners. And from those catch basins go into the 8 proposed infiltration chambers that form the one infiltration system. So we're not going to drain any of that proposed parking off-site. It's going to be contained, if you will, I'll use the word curbed area, and not be allowed to run off either north, east, or west.
Okay.
I add something to that too. If I understood your question, less technical part of the question is there really is no difference between building versus open parking. They're both considered impervious. So the removal of this building actually goes from pervious, at least in this section right here, back to pervious. So I just interpreting your question, building is gone. We've actually increased lawn, which is a pervious surface, and added some impervious to create the parking. But there is no difference between a building versus parking.
Got it. And so there'll be no, and so there isn't any, so in sort of any of the sort of the drainage proposals that were done with respect to the 5-unit, it would be sufficient to handle this current parking scheme.
This is a big step backwards in the right direction in terms of pervious surface. So we have less impervious surface in this proposal, and we've met the standards of the previous. So we're taking a favorable step backwards in terms of your concerns.
Okay. And I did have just some additional questions with respect to the area sort of in the back, this proposed recycling area. This is just an area to store barrels and such. This is not there's not a dumpster that's going to be located or anything of that nature.
No, it's everybody gets trash, everybody gets recycling. So we're trying to give them a place to put it outdoors, so it's not on we're trying to give them a contained area to do that. And we felt like it was a good add to the project.
Okay.
And I want to just add to that, the reason that we did put it in was previously, as you pointed out, we had the garages that would have handled those. And without the garages, that's why we added it in.
And also, I guess, in terms of the building, I guess the building height that was discussed before. So it's my understanding that the current building is proposed. I mean, that the building is proposed is going to be, so it'll be a 5.5-foot increase from what the current. And so, what's the height difference with respect to the earlier iteration plan? Is it higher than what was in the 5-unit that had been proposed?
Oh, it's lower. So I didn't do that. I didn't bother to do that. We've moved on from the 5-unit, so I didn't bother to do that. It's lower though, and I think the point that we're trying to drive home is that we're well under the regulations, in even the most strictest sense, in that 35.
And you'll still be, in terms of the building itself, you're still using. I mean, based on at least what I can see on the plans, it appears that you'll still be using similar architectural materials and such, because more of the existing building is there.
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see here, this roof, the pitch on the roof will be new, but we're designing it so that it mimics the old roof and the old detailing.
The only other question I have, and I think this may be for, and I'm not sure if this is if this is the right time to ask, but just in terms of a question, maybe this is more for staff, is in terms of the question about the special permit for the for the paired house versus the versus a multifamily, and sort of a question as to whether or not, because there was because we did have the zoning board of appeals did grant their request for 3-family, and so I wasn't sure whether or not we even need a special permit.
Yeah, so David or Josh, you want to take that question on?
Sure. I guess I could start, and David could add to. Yeah, so I mean, from our perspective, the zoning board of appeals granted the applicant or property owner a special permit for a 3rd unit in this building in June of 2018. So from our perspective or our opinion, we're not sure that a special permit for the additional housing density is necessary. In this particular case, now, if this is a brand new, if the ZBA decision had never happened, we would have needed the special permit for the additional density, but we don't believe that that special permit is necessary where the tandem parking and the other 1813 special design criteria are. If that makes sense to everyone.
Okay. Got it. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I have no further questions.
Okay, thanks, Lou. Tori, you're next.
I've got a few questions, but first I do want to recognize that this new design does respond in many ways to our concerns and concerns expressed by the abutters, and that's really nice to see. It there's a lot that I like about this. I'm going to ask a question that I think is very clearly answered in the plans, and you may have already answered it, but I want to be completely clear because this addresses some abutter correspondence. There is still a catch basin towards the back of the property, and you're not depending entirely on the edging to prevent runoff. Is that correct?
I guess that, Larry, do you want to answer that question, Mr. Graham?
Yeah, I did. I was answering, but I was muted, so it didn't come over too well. Yes, we are now proposing a catch basin in the northeast and the northwest corner. In the previous 5-unit plan, there was just one basin in the northeast corner, and that changes because of the change that we're doing internally with the grading.
Larry, can I interrupt you for a minute? Can everyone mute their mic because we're getting feedback and we can't hear Mr. Graham? Go ahead, Larry. Try again, please.
It's still coming across on my line. It seems to be that calling user 3. So again, to repeat, we have a catch basin proposed in both the northwest corner of the edging corner and the northeast corner. And in the previous 5-unit plan, because of the difference in grading, we just had the one basin in the northeast corner. But we revised that grading such that now we're setting it both left and right as you go northerly into the property. So I needed to have the additional basin in the northwest or left rear corner. And they both drain into opposite ends of the infiltration system.
Thank you for clarifying that. The concern I continue to have is with the exterior decks. I think the first floor deck seems like a very normal use and something that would be expected in a neighborhood like this. To have second, third story decks that close to the neighbor's backyard seems intrusive. It seems like it is not something that where the abutter at 11 Essex could simply put up a 6-foot fence and regain his privacy. How essential are those external decks on the second and third floor to this design?
Bill, you'll probably take that. This is Larry Graham again, but before you do, Bill, I just want to point out that the dwelling at 11 Essex Street to the east of us, that's all bituminous parking or pavement opposite the decks that you're speaking about. The yard is really northerly of that. You know, not to say that they wouldn't use their parking area or their paved area as a backyard and might lose the privacy you're speaking about, but it is all paved parking. I just want to point that out.
Yeah, that is correct. I've stood back there and looked at where those decks would be.
I'll just add a little bit to it. I mean, the reason why we added this in is to give the future tenants there. I mean, so we're thinking quality of life for the tenants that are in there, trying to provide a place that somebody wants to live. And having access to the exterior is seen as an amenity. Is it absolutely necessary? No. So those decks could go away, and we could just have windows in that area. So, and if it's gonna, I don't want to speak for Harold, Mr. Carey, the owner of the project. I don't think that, I think the project could go on without them if they needed to.
I'm at a point where there's nothing else that would make me hesitate to approve this.
Okay. Jim, you're next.
Yeah, the only question I have, again, just on the runoff, is the runoff from the roof, is that all going to be captured in the downspouts, and is that going to flow to the cistern or what have you? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
We can hear you, Jim. Hold on one sec.
Larry Graham.
There he is.
Okay, I'm on. Basically, any of the runoff from the roof on the easterly half of the building, I should say the northeasterly portion of the building, there's a high point there. The southeasterly portion of the building will run back toward Essex Street as it does now. The northerly portion of the building will run back toward the parking and be captured. The westerly side of the building from the peak westerly, we cannot capture that. And that's going to go off to the west and not to the north.
Okay, so not on the driveway side,
Correct.
but it'll be, there's landscaping all around. Eventually we'll capture it.
Well, the edging or curbing, as I mentioned, that's going to contain it and direct it into our drainage system. That 5 feet outside is still going to go off northwest and east, but we're talking about a 5-foot strip of grass.
Mm-hmm. Could you put in gutters or downspouts that go into the soil that would essentially filter that, into the soil and not cause flooding? You know those systems I'm talking about?
Yeah, just dry wells.
Yeah, just to put it out onto the lawn or some way to capture it so there's not a concern of flooding.
Well, we could do that perhaps in the front yard, north or southeasterly corner. There isn't a lot of opportunity along that easterly side other than the southeasterly corner. But then again, once we get past the high point of the driveway, which is about 1/3 of the way back, that drainage will either go easterly, northeasterly, or northerly. Anything that goes northerly and northeasterly, according to the grading, will be captured and go into our system.
Okay, so
To answer your question, we could certainly put gutters and control it. We have gardens out here that we could outlet it from. I won't speak to dry wells or anything below the surface, but I think we can control it to the extent that we can. With the landscaping, we could even do crushed stone around the edges there, give it a place to park. So we can control it to the best that we can.
Well, and the other point being that we're not making any changes to the impervious surface of the project until you get back to the proposed parking and the additional payment in the back for that parking, 650 square feet. So there's
just trying to address some of the neighborhood concerns about flooding potential. So I know you've already gone over the the rear portion of the building, which I'm fine with. So if you would agree to a condition to that, that would satisfy me. That's all I have, John.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Peg?
I think you've addressed everything that we brought up to you last time. I'm pleased that you're staying within the footprint. I don't have a problem with building height is within the limit. I think that the engineering department has been satisfied with your drainage, and I think you've gone above and beyond by putting in the two drainage structures in the back. The only thing I would say is that, Tori, I disagree with you about the decks. I think that this is a large building, and I think the decks add character and break up that side, so that even though I've walked down there, I haven't been down there for about a month, and I can't remember exactly what the people on the deck look at, but I just think it breaks up the that one side of the house, which is rather long, and add some character detail. So I'm satisfied with what they've done, the landscaping, and I think they've addressed all our comments.
Okay, thanks, Peg. I agree. I like this new plan. I mean, obviously, the concern was 5 units before the height of the facility, so I'm comfortable with the modifications that have been made here. So, Josh, why don't we turn it over to the public? I know there's a few people from the public that would like to speak on this matter.
Sure. The first person from the public who I believe would like to talk on this matter is Mr. Dan Tesouris. Right now, his microphone is muted. I guess if he could unmute it. Thank you, Dan.
Hello.
Go ahead, sir.
Hi, I still have concerns on the edging that they're putting on and the depth of the containment pits. I mean, a wood structure, 8x8 wood structure, I mentioned in the letter, will easily rot away. Plow trucks will push it out of the way. How do I, the future, what do I do in the future when these rot away or get destroyed or removed, very easily removed to pave? And I also don't think that the impervious.
Excuse me for 1 minute.
I think it's the same use of 5.
There's some typing going on in the background. Can someone mute their mic, please?
Mr. Chairman, I don't actually think that's typing. I don't know what that noise is.
Okay. Does someone have an open mic? Can you see that, David?
Mostly everybody's muted.
Can you hear him? Did I hear you?
Yeah, it looks like just Mr. Tesouris is the only one open, so.
Okay. Go
Must be
ahead.
coming from his line.
Continue, sir.
Okay, my biggest concern is the flooding. And it sounds like I'm hearing echoing now. But anyways, it sounds like I'm worried about the flooding. I don't think that wood berm or area is adequate. I think it should be cement with a little bit of a footing, something that's permanent. I'm worried about future, once this is okayed, they can turn around and pump top the whole thing. There's no control over that. And I just see nothing but issues for me down the road. My garage and dwelling is almost on the line. The snow's going to get pushed back there. I think it's going to be a bad situation for me. That's it.
Okay. We appreciate your comments. Josh, who else would like to speak on this matter?
One moment. Mr. Derek Whittington.
Hey guys, thank you. First, I want to say that I still think that the building is, too much mass. It's too big. The entire building functions to my side. And it looked like in the plan, it was three bedrooms apartments. I mean, if you put 2 people in each bedroom, that's 18 people living next door. Along with a lot of the other neighbors. I know you guys put the basins in and there's a drainage system, but that doesn't mean that it's always gonna work. Hopefully it does work. But I know my backyard floods, especially in the winter. Once it starts melting, the water accumulates behind my garage, in front of my garage. The bulkhead to the basement is right there. It's been a problem. I've only been here 2 years, but it has been a problem. Along with where they push the snow, a lot of times the plow driver who would plow 13 Essex Street, he has no choice but to plow the snow into my driveway, which isn't a big deal, I don't mind being neighborly and, dealing with things like that. But when it starts to become, if I could say like an apartment complex, then I don't want to deal with that for someone who it's not their home. It's just an investment and it's just a money thing. A lot of the neighbors, I would say almost every neighbor I talk to doesn't think it's a good idea. I bought in Danvers, in this area, on this road, on both ends. It's a left or right turn. It's not a pass through. It's it's a nice, quiet neighborhood. There's no other, apartment complex style homes like this one is becoming or trying to become. The owner at 15 Essex Street says she doesn't like it.
We still connected?
Hi, Bill. I can hear you. I can't hear anybody else except for you.
Yeah.
I'm here. I lost audio for a long time also. For a couple
I'm
If
Audio for a
anybody
long
can
time
hear
as
me,
well.
are we having issues? I don't hear anything. Frozen.
We're back now.
Mayor,
Yeah.
I think we all lost audio for about 2 minutes. I
Huh?
think
Is he-
everyone was in the middle of describing his feelings on that one.
So how did we leave it? I'm sorry, I got lost too with the audio.
I think Mr. Whittington was
Yeah.
in the middle of describing
Right.
his feelings on the project. Mr. Whittington, you there? Derek?
David, is there anyone else that would like to speak? And then when he joins, we can let him finish.
Sure, yeah, I think Stephen Walsh is here to speak. Mr. Walsh, you there?
Yes, I am. Are we back on?
Yes,
Are all the
Yeah,
members back on?
go ahead, Mr. Walsh.
and we can hear you,
Yep.
yes.
All right. As you know, in the letter which I sent to you today, which expressed my concerns that this project is an overbuild for this area, that this is the wrong place for you to initiate this expansion. This is, as I said, it's a typical house and a typical lot, and you're encouraging speculation in this neighborhood to make multiple three families everywhere. And frankly, the issue is not how nice these places are going to look. The issue is whether bonus density is permitted. And under this zoning bylaw for bonus density, the applicant has to have a public benefit, and there is no public benefit here. And as was said in the last meeting, one tree doesn't cut it. And that's all that the public benefit there is to be offered in this. It is not, in my opinion, this man, am I still on?
Yep, go ahead.
This applicant is under a different zoning permit in his application to you today, and he does not meet the density, bonus density requirements. His previous zoning board application was granted to him on the basis that this building does not change on the exterior. And that was provided to you by me today earlier in those zoning board minutes, which reflect that when Mr. Carey was proposing this to the Zoning Board of Appeals, he agreed there'd be no expansion of the building. And frankly, he had the same conversation with me that he had with that zoning board over the back fence, and I agreed not to oppose it. This is a different matter. This is a precedent-setting matter under your new zoning bylaws, and you are encouraging the overbuild and speculation by developers who like the idea that the downtown of Danvers has some appeal to it. And really what you're going to do is this is the beginning of the end of that appeal, because you're just going to overcrowd it and pave it over. The tandem parking is got to be a frustrating event for the two units. People backing out, have somebody has to move their other car before that car can be moved. They're not necessarily a husband and wife, could be two, roommates or whatever. And eventually they're gonna want to pave over that green area right between the two. And there's no provision in your laws to stop that. With respect, Mr. Whitting, Derek, I should say, has got cut off, but he has expressed to me, and I share his concern, that those decks are an intrusion to his privacy. And I agree with Tori that there's no way for him to block that out, that those people on the third floor are going to be looking right down on him 15 feet across that driveway. And if you're inclined to do this, even though I think you're wrong, and that he doesn't, if he wanted to use the other permit, he would have used it. It wouldn't be sitting in his back pocket, because he knows the other permit, he can't do anything to the building on the exterior. That's why he's going under this one. So he has a 2-family going to a 3-family. I share Tori's concern, and I really think I would be very upset if I were Derek having that invasion of my privacy and no way of preventing it. And the fact that Mrs. Zielinski thinks it's a nice amenity, she's not living next door to it. And I think that a lot of consideration should be given to number 11, who has a lovely property, and this project would unnecessarily, even if granted, invade his privacy on with those decks. I appreciate all the other efforts that you've made, but I still think that there is no public benefit, and it has to be in writing by this board what the public benefit is. And as was stated before, one tree, it doesn't cut it. Aside from that, my major concern is those decks. Thank you.
Thank you. David, I think it's important, since this is the first project in this district, since a lot of study was taken over the years and approved by town meeting, to address some of the comments that have been made around additional units, public benefit. Can you respond to some of those points that Mr. Walsh brought out?
Sure. So I guess starting from the beginning with this project, because it's a fairly complicated one, the current building is listed as a 2-unit development. It was an illegal 3-unit, so it actually had an additional 3rd unit. Mr. Carey went to the zoning board in 2018 after purchasing the property to essentially, I guess you'd say, make it right and add the 3rd unit legally. So the zoning board granted him that density increase, if you want to call it that. But as I said, it was 3 units listed as 2, so it's kind of tough there to figure out how you want to phrase that. But for the special permit for the downtown zoning, he does have to provide certain public benefits for a special permit and increased density. I think the issue here for us at the staff level was that he doesn't need that special permit from the planning board, as he already has the permit from the zoning board of appeals, which is still valid because it has not lapsed yet. So it runs for 3 years. It was a special permit, just like the planning board special permits. So that said, under the new proposal that he has, he doesn't really need to provide public benefits because he's not actually asking for additional density that he doesn't already have. So I guess that's where we're at for this project. I think it was, the 5-unit project was a completely different thing, and I think the board stated pretty much unanimously that they didn't think the public benefit was enough to offset the increase in density. So,
okay. That was
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. John, I just had one other comment, if I may. I was just looking through the ZBA decision from 2018 that was brought up by Mr. Walsh, just for clarification, and I did not see any comments or conditions in that decision which attributes anything to any exterior changes or footprint to the building in any manner. So just for informational purposes for everyone, the decision did not contain any conditions about the manner in which the 3rd unit would occur, if that makes sense.
Okay.
It was just a blanket. There are 3 units and 6 parking spaces that were approved by the ZBA in 2018.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you, Josh. Is there other members of the public, Josh, that wanted to speak on this application?
I just want to make sure I was clear. I got cut off.
Okay.
I don't know where it ended, but that's another thing. Like the holding these meetings online. I just was pleading my case, and then I got cut off. I've seen other Danvers meetings have been held in person. This is a very important meeting to me, and then when I'm pleading my case, I got cut off. I think that's unfair. I don't know when I got cut off. It's easy to sit behind a computer in your house on the other side of Danvers and say that things are nice and this is going to be great, but I live next door, I live here, this is my home, It's not an investment property. It's not a money thing. You know, this is my life. This is where I live. This is everyone on the block, their homes, who enjoy their land and enjoy their space. And it's just, you know, we're getting intruded on by, you know, a want to progress financially. And, you know, just, I hope you guys consider that these are people's homes, and we live here, and we're here every day. And, you know, it's just not the neighborhood for apartment style living, in my opinion, you know. And, you know, I hope you guys can consider the neighbors. The entire neighborhood's against it. I hope you can consider that. If you make your decision, you know. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you for your comments. I will tell you, the board takes everything into consideration when we look at all these applications. If there's, so Josh or David, are there other public comments?
I don't have any email comments, Mr. Chair. I think everyone who wanted to speak on this project has spoken.
Okay.
Yes. All the correspondence we also received before the meeting was provided to the board today. Everything that the planning division received on this matter was sent to the planning board today.
Right. The planning board got Mr. Walsh's letter, so let the record show that. Given that, why don't we come back to the board? Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
I move that we close 13 Essex Street public hearing.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, let's do the roll call vote. Jim Sears?
Yes.
Peg Zielinski?
Yes.
Lou George?
Yes.
Tori Adler?
Yes.
And the chair's in favor of closing the public hearing. So why don't we move towards the first item, the request for site plan approval. Is there a motion to accept the site plan approval as presented?
So, John, sorry to interrupt. So that first item, that item that you're talking about on the agenda, the second item, that is actually the site plan that was originally submitted in February 2020, and that's the original site plan for the original 3-unit. Staff would actually request that application be withdrawn, and that's not the application that's in front of us right now. That is actually the second item. The application that that we're potentially voting on tonight is that third item on the agenda. That second item should be withdrawn. It's a procedural thing, but wanted to let you know.
Okay, so why don't we turn it to the applicant? We'd like permission, or we would ask you if you would withdraw that application on item 2 of the agenda. Larry, do you speak, or?
Yes, as a lead for the team, we will simultaneously withdraw that application for the previous 3-unit conversion plan with the board's action on this 3-unit plan.
Okay, so does Josh, does the board need to vote on the withdrawal?
I think yes, you should.
Okay. All right, so why don't we address the withdrawal first, and then we'll get into item 3 on the agenda. So is there a motion to accept the applicant's request to withdraw item 2 of the agenda, the request for site plan approval?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, roll call vote. Jim?
Yes.
Peg Zielinski?
Yes.
Lou George?
Yes.
Tori Adler?
Yes.
And the chair supports the withdrawal. So let's go to item 3, request for special permit and site plan approval submitted by Errol Carry for property at 13 Essex Street pursuant to section 18.4.c, 18.5.d.6.c, 18.13, and section 4 of the zoning bylaw. Says property is in the Danvers Town Center Live Work District, zoning district, assessors map 43, lot 423. Is there a motion to approve the request for special permit as discussed and presented tonight?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
So let's do the roll call vote. Jim Sears,
Yes.
Peg Zawinski,
Yes.
Lou George,
Yes.
Tori Adler.
No,
Is it a no, Tori?
that's correct.
Okay, and the chair's in favor of the application. So the special permit is granted by a 4-to-1 vote. Okay, thank you to the applicant and all the feedback that we got over the last several months on this particular project.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
This is David here. I believe we do have to still approve the new site plan associated with the special permit. And Josh, correct me if I'm wrong, but the engineering division had some conditions they'd like to include that were included in the certificate of action.
Yes, that is correct. There is a letter, there was 10, roughly 10 conditions that the engineering department, we had a discussion with the applicant last week about the plans. The applicant has agreed to 10 plan changes, and those conditions are currently in the certificate of action in the packet. But they will be included in the decision once it's stamped with the town clerk, but you do have to vote on that, the site plan application also. Or separately.
If I can help on that for reference, it's a September 15th, 2020 letter from H.L. Graham Associates, Inc. that outlines those 9 points.
Mr. Chairman, should we read those special conditions?
Looks like we might have lost the chair again. I'm not sure if Mr. Sears wants to take the helm. Oh, we might have lost Jim too.
No, I'm here.
Okay.
I'm here. Yeah, we should probably read into the record this certificate of action.
Okay.
Let me see. Was that part of the? That's part of the download, right? Let me see here.
Yep. Yeah, it should be Jim. Let me know if you can't find it or.
I can't get my download, but it was there. I read it.
Yeah, it's a PDF. Meg, I always PDF everything for you.
Well, I thank you very much. It's not that I didn't get it. I got it, but my iPad has died, and I usually have my iPad beside my computer.
I just have a question of clarification, Jim, just with respect to the certificate of action. I know we spoke earlier about the special, that there's not a need for the special permit to cover the additional density in view of what the ZBA had done. So does that ultimately drop off of the certificate of action?
Yeah, for the special permit, Lou, that will be modified. The draft, they're drafts. And then, obviously from what comes out of the meeting and our discussion, staff alters the decisions before they're submitted to the town clerk's office.
Understood. Okay. Thank you.
So I can read that in if you'd like. This is to certify that a meeting held on September 22nd, 2020 by a motion duly made and seconded. The Danvers Planning Board voted to approve the site plan application submitted by Earl Carey for property at 13 Essex Street, Assessors Map 43, Lot 423, shown on the following plans. Plans listed: site plan entitled Site Plan 13 Essex Street, Danvers, Mass, by Graham Associates, Inc. September 8, 2020, consists of 2 sheets. This approval is subject to the following conditions. 1, the applicant and/or property owner will prepare and resubmit stormwater calculations. 2, the applicant and/or property owner will provide a detail for 6 feet by 6 foot pressure-treated timber edging. 3, the applicant and/or property owner will provide a detail for 6 feet by 6 feet pressure-treated bollard with reflectors or reflector tape. 4, the applicant and/or property owner will revise sheet 2 of 2, remove the errant rectangle depicted at the front of the vehicle, parking space 3-1. 5, the applicant and/or property owner will provide a detail for the silt fence and straw wattle erosion control device. 6, the applicant and/or property owner will eliminate the detail for the proposed 30-inch inside diameter mini mason's call for and provide a detail for the 48-inch inside diameter standard catch basin with 4-foot sumps and hoods. The applicant and/or property owner will specify 12 HDPE pipe out of the catch basins to a 4-inch header and 4-inch feeds into the infiltration system. 7, the applicant and/or property owner proposes and accepts the condition of planning board subsequent to their approval, but prior to issuance of water and sewer permit, a more detailed plan will be developed and submitted to engineering and planning divisions for domestic water service, sewer service, and fire protection service. 8, applicant and/or property owner will clarify on the site plan the area between the timber edging and the property line will be finished as 6-inch loam and seed. General conditions approved by the planning board on January 27, 2004, amended through February 27, 2018, as written, which are standard conditions. This approval is also subject to the attached list of general conditions approved by the planning board on January 27, 2004, amended through February 27, 2018, which are incorporated in this certificate of action by reference. The approval of this site plan shall lapse within 2 years from the grant thereof. Construction has not begun by such date except for good cause. So that is the motion. Do we have a second on the motion?
I'm back, Jim, so I'll second that motion.
I'm not sure you can second it, John.
Okay.
Second.
I'll second it. Oh,
Okay. John, you can call for the vote.
Okay, so we have who do we have for the record, the first and second? I heard, who was the
Me.
first? Just for, okay, Jim.
I read the
and then
motion.
second. Okay.
I read the motion, so I'm the first.
Okay, and then Peg was second?
I think Lou might have been there too.
Lou, okay. We'll go with Lou. So roll call
Okay.
vote. Jim Sears,
Yes.
Peg Zelinski,
Yes,
Lou George,
Yes.
Lori Adler,
No.
and the chair's in favor as well. So does that conclude all the administrative votes that we need to be taken on this application, David and Josh?
Yes.
Okay, so we can go on to 13 Putnam Street.
That's correct.
Okay. So again, thank you for everyone's participation on that last application. So the next public hearing, 13 Putnam Street, request for major modification to an approved site plan submitted by Thomas Wilkie of Easygoing Realty for property at 13 Putnam Street pursuant to Section 4 of the zoning bylaw. Said property is located in a residential 1 zoning district. The applicant proposed to construct a second-floor bedroom on the same footprint as the first floor at the rear of the existing 2-family dwelling. Assessors map 43, lot 375. I'll turn it over to the applicant, and Josh, if you can introduce.
Yep. Yeah, it's Mr. Tom Wilkie, I think is here, the property owner and the applicant.
Hello. Hi. Yeah, Tom Wilkie, 13 Putnam Street. You have a little bit of an unusual situation, and just to give you a quick backstory, I don't know who was on the planning board at the time, but the original site plan was approved on June 26, 2018. And then we purchased the property in August of that year. And with that, we received a certificate of action that had been written up by the planning board, as well as a memorandum from the engineering department. We started construction and we built to the site plan, as well as we followed the certificate of action, and we worked pretty much hand in hand with the engineering department and the water and sewer department to make sure that everything was done according to the plan. In January of 2019, we wanted to request building a room above an existing room. And so we went to the building department and asked them what we needed to do. They said that we had to go before the zoning board, and which we did, and that was approved January 28th of 2019. We then we're going to get our sign-offs and inspections from the electrical and plumbing and the engineering department, and we got our final inspection from the building department. And when I went to get the certificate of occupancy, we were told at that point that we needed to go before the planning board for a major modification. Unfortunately, we were up against actually 2 closings. So given the time requirement to go before the planning board, unfortunately, we had 2 families that have been displaced during that period, so at the end of August. So I want to thank Josh and David for getting us in the meeting as soon as possible so that we can get them into their homes as soon as possible. We built to the site plan. The project came out great. We built to the period. There's plenty of open space. I don't know if any of you have actually had a chance to go over there, but I'm very proud of what we did. It's a very unusual property. It's really unlike any other development that's been done in downtown Danvers recently, with all the open space and the fact that it's really still looks like it's a house from the 1800s. So, and that's it. So we're just requesting that that would be reviewed favorably for that room that we built over the existing room on the site plan.
Okay. Peg, why don't I start with you for questions, if any?
So the room's already been built,
Yes.
and you went through the whole process and no one told you you had to have a major budget modification?
No.
Okay. I don't know what questions I have. I guess my first question was, I didn't realize that this would be a major modification. So I guess that David or Josh could answer that question, why it's a major modification. It's with an existing footprint. What was the square footage of the room that was built?
It's 210 square feet.
Yeah. So Peg, it's not a big room. There's a clause in the bylaw that's any increase to the square footage of a structure.
Okay. Okay.
So,
I don't have any problems with this.
Okay, thank you. Tori?
It seems to me like every attempt was made to comply with the laws, and was this just miscommunication on the town? I don't know. It seems like an honest mistake, and it's already built. I think I feel okay with this.
Okay. Lou?
Yeah, I guess this is a question just for maybe for staff, but sort of what's next here? I mean, we obviously see a letter from the building inspector that didn't that denied a certificate of occupancy. So sort of what happens next in the process?
So I guess I could start and David finish. I guess we, after tonight's meeting, depending on how it's voted on, we'd eventually, submit a decision to the town clerk's office. It would be sent to the building department, so they would have a decision. We have the as-built plan for the project already. I believe, without speaking for the building department, that a certificate of occupancy would likely be granted in the near future, but I'm not sure if David has anything else to add.
Nope, that pretty much sums it up. So from here, we'd file whatever decision that you agree on. If it's favorable, he'd go to the building department, most likely get his CO.
And thank you. And we don't have any, and I guess this is more of a question for the applicant. I think you alluded to this, that there's no, with respect to the building department, aside from that issue in terms of the modification issue, there's no, there was no problem with respect to inspections or that sort of thing.
No, everything's been approved. Fire, electrical, plumbing, and the final building inspection has been signed off on.
Okay. I don't see, I mean, it seems like maybe there was a communication issue. I don't see any, I see like you appear to be acting in good faith. I have no concerns with this myself. So I have no further questions.
Okay, thanks, Lou. Jim?
I don't have any questions. I'm fine with it.
Yeah, and I'm fine too. I mean, I don't know, David or Josh, if there's what more we could have done to help any applicant like this in the future. So hopefully we can all learn from this particular transaction. This is definitely unusual that I've seen since I've been on the board. So, it's more of a statement than needing you guys to comment. Is there anyone on the public from the public that would like to comment on this? Do we have anyone, Josh or David, that would like to comment on this application?
We don't have any email correspondence, and I don't believe there was anybody from the public who wanted to speak.
I think that potentially Mr. Stephen Walsh might. He is still on the meeting, and he did email me earlier today. He is unmuted. I'm not sure if you wanted to comment. But
I would support this man. I think he did a nice project. I think it's a paperwork issue.
Yep. Thank you for that comment. All right, given that there's no other public comments, why don't I bring it back to the board? Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved. I moved to close the public hearing.
For a second?
Second.
Okay, let me do the roll call again. Jim Sears?
Yes.
Meg Zielinski?
Yes.
Lou George?
Yes.
Tori Adler?
Yes.
And I'm in favor of this as well, to close the public hearing. And now let's do it on the motion to approve the request for a major modification to approve site plan submitted by Mr. Wilkie for Easygoing Realty for property at 13 Putnam Street pursuant to Section 4 of the zoning bylaw. Said property is located in the residential 1 zoning district. The applicant proposes to construct a second floor bedroom on the same footprint as the first floor at the rear of the existing 2-family dwelling. Assessors map 43, lot 375. Is there a motion to approve the major modification as presented this evening?
Move to approve.
You want that read, John?
Is there a second?
We're going to read that point of order. We're going to read that into the, like we read the last one. Should we read those in?
I thought that's fine.
Just asking. Not much. It's just the general conditions.
Jim, if you don't mind reading it in, I don't have it right in front of me. Do you have it in front of you?
This is certified that a meeting held on September 22nd, 2020 by a motion duly made and seconded. The Danvers Planning Board voted to approve the major modification and approved site plan request submitted by Thomas Wilkie of Easygoing Realty for property at 13 Putnam Street, Assessors Map 43, Lot 375, shown on the following plans, and site plan entitled Site Development Plan in Danvers, Massachusetts, 13 Putnam Street, 01923, prepared by the Moore and Cameron Group, dated May 11, 2018, revised to June 20, 2020, consisting of 3 sheets. This approval is subject to the following conditions: the general conditions, which are the standard conditions, subject to the attached list of general conditions approved by the planning board on January 27, 2004, amended through February 27, 2018, which are incorporated in the certificate of action by reference. Any approval of this site plan shall lapse within 2 years from the grant thereof if construction has not begun by such date, except for good cause. That's it.
Okay, so we had a, let me just go back. Motion to approve by Lou, correct?
Yes.
And Peg, were you the second on that?
Second.
Okay, so let's do the roll call vote. Jim Sears?
Yes.
Peg Zelinski?
Yes.
Lou George?
Yes.
Tori Adler?
Yes.
And I'm in favor of this as well. Good luck, Mr. Wilkie.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next public hearing is a request for a major modification to approve site plan submitted by John and Nina Henson for property at 123 Dayton Street pursuant to Section 4 of the zoning bylaw. Said property is a residential 3 zoning district. The applicant proposes to construct approximately 575 square feet of new space for the school facility and associated site modifications. Josh, who do we have speaking on behalf of the applicant?
I believe it was Mr. Vat. Forgive me. Yes. Sorry. Yeah. Didn't mean to say your name incorrectly. Apologize.
No problem. And well used.
Go ahead, sir. You got the floor.
So my name is Vashek Talako from Hancock Associates. I'm here with John Pension, who is runs the school, Penfield Academy. It's a nonprofit school that has been on this site for some time. In 2015, we filed for a site plan review and got a decision to continue to work there with the school and improve in order to approve the parking and do some utility work. All that has been approved, but since then, because of COVID and the separation of students required, John Pension needs more space. Now, I don't know how many of you have been to the site at 123 Dayton Street, but basically it's approximately a 2-acre parcel, about 80,000 square feet, that slopes from the street on an even slope from about elevation 136 to about elevation 170 in the rear. Currently, there is a house that's in the front, then behind it is a cottage, and then to the left-hand side is a garage and a barn. And all is accessed via a circular driveway that has parking near the garage and up by the barn, and also there is a parking in the front on the left-hand side. The proposed addition is being added to the back of the front house. There is currently a deck that's going to be removed, and the addition 28 by 20 feet, 20 and a half feet, is going to be constructed that will contain 1 classroom. It will have a separate entrance on the right-hand side that will go into the courtyard in the back of the house. All utilities will be run through the existing house. So there is sewer, electricity, and water available. There is no gas in the street. The only new, I guess it's not really utility, it's drainage. All the water from the roof shall be captured and run into an existing well that's just to the left of the proposed addition. The well itself is dry down to at least 16 feet, which I measured myself, And so it's very convenient to put the roof water into the well. As you know, roof water is considered clean, and so there is no issue about putting it into the well. There is no landscaping proposed, and there is no new lighting proposed. As far as the plans that we submitted, we are asking for several waivers, and basically because it's such a simple project, we compressed the plans onto one plan that basically describes everything. And those waivers are on sheet C2 in the upper left-hand corner, along with all the zoning information. The lot obviously comprised with all the zoning as far as frontage area, open space, etc. I will be glad to answer any questions you may have. And John can, if you have any questions about the operation of the school, I'm sure John can answer those.
Okay, so why don't we start with you, Tori?
I think this plan looks pretty good. The site seems to have room for it. I don't have any concerns.
Okay, Lou?
Yes, and this may just be a question with respect to the school. I think that you noted that this is in response to reduce density in view of COVID. What is the present number of students, and is it anticipated that would be increasing, or would be staying stable?
John, can you please answer that? John Pension?
Yes, I'm on now. No, the numbers would stay the same. And we have 3 groups of 8. And we just need the additional space for the 3rd group because of the 6-foot distancing.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. And in terms of the, and as was mentioned just earlier, it seems like there's a fair amount of space in terms of the property. If you had any, have you touched base with the abutters at all?
Yes, I've spoken with each of them.
Okay. What if could you just summarize any sort of feedback you received?
Nope. They all seemed fine with it.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I don't think I've reviewed everything. I don't have any concerns.
Okay.
Thank you.
Peg?
So you have 24 students, 3 groups of 8?
Yes.
Okay. I don't have any concerns with this either, and this is fine with me.
Jim?
I'm fine with it.
And I'm all set as well, but just for the benefit of the public, can you just describe what the school does? I mean, there's 24 students. Those who may not know the school can just briefly give an overview of the program.
Sure. We have 1st grade through 8th grade. It's a Charlotte Mason methodology, which is a great book school. In other words, we read primary sources. And it's similar to a homeschooling program, if you will, where we're homeschooling other people's children, but they're coming to a private school.
Great. That's helpful. Thank you. Josh, David, anyone from the public wanted to speak on this particular application?
No, we did not. I did not receive any correspondence.
Yeah, we didn't get any emails on this one.
Okay. So let me bring it back to the board for a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Great, second from Tori. So let me just do the roll call again. Jim Sears?
Yes.
Meg Zelinski?
Yes.
Lou George?
Yes.
Tori Adler?
Yes.
All right, so now we'll, in the chairs in favor of closing the public hearing as well. So that, let's turn it to looking for a motion to approve the major modification to an approved site plan submitted by John and Nina Henson for property at 123 Dayton Street pursuant to Section 4 of the zoning bylaw. That property is in the residential free zoning district. The applicant proposed to construct approximately 575 square feet of new space for the school facility and associated site modification. So is Jim, again, can I turn to you? Is anything in that certificate of action that we need to put into the record?
This is to certify that a meeting held on September 22nd, 2020 by a motion duly made and seconded. Danvers Planning Board voted to approve the major modification to an approved site plan request submitted by John and Nina Pension for property at 123 Dayton Street. Assessors map 31, lot 62, shown on the following plans. Site plan entitled Permit Site Plan 123 Dayton Street, Danvers, Massachusetts, 01923. Prepared by Hancock Associates, dated August 3rd, 2020, revised September 15th, 2020. Consisting of 3 sheets. This approval is subject to the following conditions. 1, in consultation with the engineering division staff, applicant and/or property owner shall verify the location of the sewer service line prior to applying for a building permit. Revised utility plans may be required for submission. This approval is also subject to the attached list of general conditions approved by the Planning Board on January 27, 2004, amended through February 27, 2018, which are incorporated in this certificate of action by reference. Any approval of this site plan shall lapse within 2 years from the grant thereof if construction has not begun by such date except for good cause. That's it.
Sorry about that.
Motion's been made. Just need a second.
Second?
Okay, motion and second, so let's do the roll call vote. Jim Sears?
Aye. Yes.
Peg Zielinski?
Yes.
Lou George?
Yes.
Tori Adler?
Yes.
And the chair's in favor of this. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure being in front of the board once again.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Take care.
Good night.
Good night.
Have a good night. David, Josh, Aaron, you guys want to take on number 6, the proposed zoning amendments? And let me, start the public hearing, though. Let me just read this into the record. Proposed zoning amendments to the town of Danvers zoning bylaws, which includes animal husbandry, site plan approval, section 4, administration, section 2, new civic space zoning district, character-based zoning district, CBZD updates, definitions, section 40, as well as updates to the cluster development bylaw. A more detailed summary of the proposed zoning amendments can be found on the official legal advertising overview of the proposed zoning amendment by planning staff. So, David, do I turn it over to you? Are you taking it from here?
Sure, yeah, I can go ahead and do that. Gonna go ahead and share my screen. Everyone see that?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm just gonna jump right in because I'm sure we're all wide awake right now. First, I wanted to cover a timeline. There's been a few changes, I think, since the last time we spoke about the fall town meeting, and then we're going to run through a bit of the updates. I'll go through section by section. I think it's actually in chronological order by the way it appears in the bylaw. Obviously, stop me with any questions, and we'll take a pause for questions after each section. So while we did open the public hearing, if it's getting to be a certain time where we don't want to continue with every single one of these, just let me know and we can pick it up the first meeting in October. So the anticipated timeline. Obviously tonight we're opening the hearings. One thing that has changed since the last time we spoke, there was a petition submitted by a group of residents, and they had the required amount of signatures to authorize the petition to have a special town meeting in addition to the special town meeting that we were already going to have on November 16th. So now there'll be a special town meeting also on October 26th. So Aaron and I appeared before the selectmen last week to talk about some of these zoning articles, and it was also discussed the timeline for the new special town meeting. I I believe the Board of Selectmen asked that they be consolidated, but they were not able to make that happen. So we're going to have 2 town meetings in the fall. And that being said, the Board of Selectmen also asked us to attempt to include as much as we possibly could on our end on the special town meeting. So there's an owner's petition for rezoning that will now be moving to October 26th. That was previously slated for November 16th. And there'll be some other changes to other sections of the general bylaw that I can go over in a minute. Are there any other questions related to the timeline that's up on the screen?
No, not from me, unless any other from the board members have a question.
All right. So as you know, just to kick this off, obviously you were all around or in some way involved, even Mr. Adler. We had 4 sections of the zoning bylaw adopted this February at town meeting. During that process, staff was going through and looking to attempt to, what I've been saying the whole time was modernize certain sections of the bylaw and update, just in most cases, some errors. So that's a lot of what we ended up doing from between February and frankly now. Obviously due to COVID, we were working at home on that. It was a bit more difficult than I anticipated, but we made it work. So here we are. Other town bylaws and regulations that I just mentioned that are getting updated are the traffic rules and regs. Those are the purview really of the Board of Selectmen and the Traffic Advisory Commission. The electric division's looking at a wireless communications update. One item that planning staff has going on October 26th is changes to the wetlands bylaw. So that's what the Conservation Commission oversees. We've updated some zoning regulations, which you'll be seeing most likely next meeting. And the engineering division would like to update their stormwater regulations, which we've had to actively work with them quite a bit on, which has been good. It's been a great experience working with those guys and gals. So jumping right into the first edit, this is a pretty vanilla one. It's just a change to section 2 of the bylaw, administration. So we are adding a clause that would allow us to add pagination to the bylaw and then update that if it's erroneous in any way. We want to be able to update headings and then just change any, literally just typos and words without having to bring edit every time back to town meeting. We're also adding a section on severability. There's no clause in there currently, so that way if one portion of the bylaw happens to be challenged, the whole thing doesn't go down. So that would be one motion. I coupled them here. There's another separate motion to town meeting to outline the planning board powers and duties. So the current bylaw goes over the powers and authority of the zoning board of appeals, but it doesn't fully get into the powers and authority of the planning board. So it doesn't name them necessarily outright as a special permit granting authority. So that's something we do want to correct. Again, it's administrative, but from a staff perspective, we think it's a necessity to have in there going forward. So any questions on that? Like I said, it was pretty straightforward.
No, I don't have any questions. Anyone have questions for David?
I don't have any questions.
Okay.
Good one.
All right, moving on then, hearing none. Gets a little bit more intricate after this. So staff did go through and we're trying to update the site plan review section of the bylaw. So this was more or less, I think, as I alluded to last time, a pretty extensive overhaul. One thing that we're trying to do is collapse the current 3-tiered system into a 2-tiered system. The current book, there's not a heck of a lot of difference between the major modifications and the minor modifications. The applicants have to provide pretty much all the same material, and more or less the requirements are pretty much the same. So we kind of saw collapsing that into just 2 things reviewed at the staff level, and then what goes to the board as kind of an easier update that would help us eliminate some forms and just eliminate some backlog. We did update the review criteria, so that's what you could call subjective criteria that the board considers as it's going through the process. So we currently have 6. We updated it to about 9 to include some new photometric information, as well as some other landscaping and circulation requirements. We fleshed them out a little bit more too. So if you want to take a look at those and just focus on some updated criteria as you're going through and reading about it. One of the other major portions we did, there's a lot of design requirements in the actual bylaw itself existing, a lot of them, a significant portion having to do with landscaping. So one thing we'd like to do rather than have those in the zoning bylaw itself is move those to the regulations. And that would allow the board to have kind of a more enhanced purview over it. It would be a little bit more fluid. So rather than having to go to town meeting to just change screening or landscaping requirements, the board would be able to do that. So the bylaw would still say, you have to comply with the design requirements, obviously, but what those exactly are, the board could shift and adjust, as time goes on. And one of the larger items that you'll notice, because it would seem like it's missing, it's not missing. We moved the table of off-street parking from the site plan section to the end of the bylaw with all the other tables. So we currently have a table of uses, a dimensional table. There's a few others in there. So this would become table 5, the table of off-street parking, because the way it's laid out, if you read through it, it really looks like off-street parking is only a requirement if you're subject to site plan review. We didn't want to keep that the way it was for sake of confusion or to be challenged. I mean, in theory, it's supposed to apply to the entirety of the bylaw, but the way it's written and the way it's in there, it doesn't look like it actually applies unless you're coming in for site plan. So in case you're wondering why that's not included in the draft edit, it would be proposed to get moved to the very end of the book. I think that's all I have for the slide, but I'm happy to take any questions on that one.
Questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I have a question on the reduction of a 3-tiered system to a 2. And I apologize, David. I got all the material and I have read it. But as I said, my iPad died and I usually have it on my iPad because I'm not technological enough to put things up here on one computer. Is this where you're talking about intermediate review? And I'd never seen the intermediate review that was contained in the language. Is this where I saw it, the reduction of the 3-tiered system to 2?
That's correct, Peg. So we were proposing to change up the names to, this is a system similar to what the I believe it's a town, the town of Northampton has, it might be a city. So they have, the way their bylaw is written, it lists out what goes to intermediate review for staff, and then anything that doesn't fall into that, anything at all that requires, that hits a trigger, then goes to the board. So it doesn't necessarily spell out exactly what would go to the board on a point-by-point basis, because there's some stuff that comes in for you all when it hits the building division that we sort of have to sort it out and work through where it's going to go and how it goes. So I think this makes it a bit more straightforward in that there's pretty specific performance guidelines for what goes to staff, and if not, it goes to you guys.
One thing that concerned me, and I apologize because my memory is not great anymore, but there was something in there under intermediate review that wouldn't come to the board, and I thought was the construction of 4 new units, specifically.
Yep, for residential units. So that was a proposed change on our end. So the way it is now, basically any project that's not a single family house or a 2-family house requires site plan. So you have 3 and 4 unit projects that require either an approval, or if you're increasing that, a major modification. And effectively, at the staff level, we were thinking of increasing that from duplexes to 4 units. I mean, obviously, they're still going for a building permit. You'd have to meet the parking requirements. You'd have to meet all of the performance standards in the bylaw. It just wouldn't necessarily have to come in for site plan review.
So, for example, 13 Essex Street that we had tonight was going from a 2 to a 3 family. Would that be something that would trigger site plan review?
So it gets a little nuanced there in that we have a ton of stuff that requires special permits. So if they require a special permit, which that project did,
yeah, but I think it didn't require, yeah.
Yeah, so that would come in for both special permit with site plan review. So
if it didn't need a special permit, it wouldn't go to planning board for site plan.
Right. So say you have a much larger lot than that project currently has, and they can fit everything within the setbacks. They can park it. Everything's adequate. It would essentially take those projects straight to a building permit. So they'd be reviewed by the building division and the fire department for fire suppression. But as long as it's straight by right, 4 units or less, it would be excluded.
So over the years, we've had a number of cases where we've had single-family homes on a large lot and 4 condos have been built before, would that fall into this? Or would that be 5 structures, even though one is an existing home?
Oh, so they'd be adding, if they were adding 4, then yes, it would go to site plan review.
Okay, so it would have to be only 4, no more than 4 residences on one lot.
Right.
Okay, so it couldn't be existing, okay. I'm a little concerned about that one, and I do have to go back and read the rest, but that's one that kind of caught my eye immediately.
Okay.
So those are my only comments right now.
Yeah, I share the same concern that I need to understand that one a little bit more, because we've had a lot of small projects, right, that we've had some input on, so.
Sure. No, I hear you. It's open for discussion. These are still drafts. I'm happy to take questions too as you're reading them. If you want to shoot me off an email or just give me a phone call too at the office or on my phone, happy to talk through it. Looked like Aaron Henry had raised his hand in the chat.
Oh, go ahead, Aaron.
Thank you, John. I was just going to say, and this will come up, I think, in another proposed article, because of the way 40A limits scope or regulates scope of town meeting articles, we proposed the widest possible to start. That way we can narrow the proposal as we go forward. If you start too narrow as you go through, if you wish to go broader, you're prohibited under statute from doing so. So again, we try to take a more expansive view to start with, and then as comments come in, we can narrow and eliminate. You just can't go the other way. So rather go too broad to begin with.
Okay.
I remember that, Aaron, from many previous town meetings. So I understand that.
All right, I'm going to move forward.
I actually had a question, Ms. Chair, I just had a question just with respect to section 4, just in terms of the updated, David, just in terms of the updated review criteria again. So it looks like, we're taking what was in, am I correct, in section 4.6 and now moving it to a new, like 4.4?
Yes, right.
Review procedure?
Right.
Okay, so anything in terms of, it appears that there's some more detail there. Anything that's anything substantive that we should that you wanted to point out that's in terms of a change?
Sure. So lighting definitely is enhanced in this. I've been picking up from most of the meetings that lighting needs to be addressed in some fashion by the applicants, and probably look at that more in depth at our level as well. So there's a approval criteria in here for lighting. And then some of the updates to stormwater and drainage. So we've added low impact design techniques to the criteria. So really kind of updating the stormwater to more, I wouldn't call this a standard, I'd say more modern standards. This isn't a standard, but at least subjectively at your planning board review, you'd be able to see what they're actually doing to mitigate stormwater. And again, sometimes that may be just it goes into a catch basin and it goes into a pipe and goes somewhere else. But I think we're trying to encourage more infiltration on site, given the changes at the federal level to the stormwater permits.
Okay.
So.
Okay, great. Thanks. And as was mentioned earlier too, I also want to take a look again a little more carefully in terms of the sort of the threshold in terms of for planning board review in terms of multiple units. So.
Sure. Yep.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question on this as well?
Yeah, go ahead, Tori.
David, the new 4.6 site plan review is required for, which is wonderfully clear language. Does that take the place of the existing 4.2 applicability? It seems to me, and I think I may be wrong in my interpretation, it seems to me like something that was not enlarged by 500 square feet or more currently would not be subject to site plan review. But I'm not sure that is correct. And it seems like the new 4.6 moves that up to 1,000 feet. So,
yeah, sorry.
Since I'm not sure I'm understanding the current 4.2 correctly,
Yep.
Not really sure of the impact of 4.6 in the new proposed language.
Sure. We did shift some stuff around. So in terms of the numbering that you're discussing, I'm trying to look through to see where it actually ended up. But I think overall your question was currently in the bylaw, it looks like there's an exception for 500 square feet. That section, I believe, lives in the multi-tenanted structure section. I'll have to double back on that and check. I'm looking through the red lines, but there's a lot of red. But you're not wrong. We did change the size limitation for what would be exempted. So one of the things that we were trying to do with this update, and again, Aaron mentioned before about the broadening of the scope, was to go back to what the courts have kind of talked about what site plan is really used for, and it's really for large projects that have neighborhood and community-wide impacts. So a lot of the applications that I've seen, at least since I've been here, have been really, really small, arguably some de minimis projects. So one of the things we wanted to do was really focus in on the projects that do have a macro level impact, and possibly not so much of some of the other things that we've been seeing. I recall there was a few, given the way our bylaw describes what a structure is, somebody was adding a fire department regulated stairwell, so they had to add it, and that had to come in for a major modification to a site plan. So it does put a lot of onus on an applicant to have to go pay for a legal ad, get a 9-sheet plan set together to add the stairwell. So that was one of the things we were trying to be cognizant of.
So we saw a case today that was, I believe, less than 300 square feet. So what I'm wondering is whatever exemption made that require a site plan review, would that undermine this new 1,000 square feet?
So under the proposed bylaw, that would not have come before you. Under the existing bylaw, that was in because there's another clause in the current bylaw that says any increase to the square footage of a structure.
Okay, so there's an inconsistency in the current.
I guess you could go that far. I think the way it was written, I sort of understand the intent and that they wanted to exempt small projects, but effectively added in later to the major modification section that if you're increasing a structure at all, it comes in. I think the issue lies with how we define a structure in the bylaw. So a structure is anything permanently or temporarily mounted to the ground in the current bylaw. So I believe the previous edits to site plan was trying to exempt those small projects, but then the definition didn't get changed in section 40. So instead of going to section 40 to change what is a structure, which would, I don't think at this point the building division kind of has it down, what a structure is. They might not be too happy with that. We figured to update the site plan section if we were touching it anyway.
I agree with the idea of exempting smaller projects, but 500 or 600 square feet in some of the downtown neighborhoods could have a lot of impact, could seem to neighbors like a pretty big project. I'm not sure 1,000 square feet is the right number, but I like the idea of this.
Okay. I will also note to Peg's point and your point, Tori, earlier, particularly with the new zoning, you'd be hard pressed on those small lots in downtown to come in without a special permit of some sort. So in which case you'd still completely be before the planning board. So just for what that's worth.
Good, that's helpful. Other questions for David on this slide?
I think what you're doing is a good idea too, David. I mean, for years, Jim, I don't see Jim's face up there, but we've talked about sometimes we have to vote on things that are just like, why are we even looking at this? And, so I think that if there's some way that, I don't know how we can set a certain size, square footage or whatever, but there are a number of things that do come before planning board that over the years we've all wondered why we knew why, but we wondered why we had to do this. So I think this is a good idea. I just need to understand it better.
Sure, no, that's completely fair. And like I said, a lot of this comes out of the time that I've been here trying to read what you all have to deal with and your kind of feelings on what's important, what's maybe a little less important.
And I think if I may interrupt, Mr. Farmer, if that's okay.
Go ahead, Ann.
Thank you. I think David's putting a nice spin on it since we've been here and really had a chance to get under the hood and do some triage of the permitting process. We really get bogged down with the administrative site plan reviews. So those are the ones that don't get to the planning board because they are under the current rules. We're allowed to deal with them. And we really spend a lot of time having to do ticky-tack plan review, oftentimes for something in Cherry Hill or out on Electronics Ave or the malls. And so again, I think we want to try to, the high level goal here is to streamline that so that we're regulating projects that matter, that have, as David said, kind of community neighborhood impact, and kind of free up some of that bandwidth at our level so that we can put staff on higher value projects. Some of these things, as Peg said, it's, if you think some of those ones are bad, you should see the ones that we have to spend about 10, 15 hours a week processing. You know, it's not good for the businesses. It's not, it doesn't feel like a good investment of staff time, but we have to deal with it. So hopefully these changes will also down the road lead to staff being able to focus more intently on projects, whether they be development administration, like you deal with tonight, or what we'd really like to see is be able to open up some bandwidth so that we can do higher level planning projects itself. So anyway, thank you for my 5 minutes on the soapbox.
No, that makes sense.
All right. Just moving on to, I mentioned this previously, the character-based zoning district cleanup. I will caveat, it does seem a little odd we're coming back to you now with this, given that we just passed it, but we did notice some things. It's a very large chunk of the bylaw as we were going through that we didn't really want to let linger, so we figured might as well get to it and change it, strike while the iron's hot, since it seems like we are getting more projects, or will be getting more projects downtown. That being said, there's not a heck of a lot in here that's substantive to be changed. It's a lot of really small edits to single words or single lines. A few things to point out. Table 18.3, it's the parking requirements for this section. They're listed by bedroom for certain uses, but it only lists them, the requirements by bedroom for parking for mixed use buildings. And after speaking with Mr. Brovitz, that should also include multifamily. So if you read the table as is, it doesn't look like there's a parking requirement for multifamily. That just got dropped somewhere in the table, so we're re-adding that back in. It looks like it's a large edit, but it's something that should have been in there the whole time. And I don't really think there's much else besides actual typographical errors or changing citations. So, but if anybody comes across anything they don't understand or seems odd, certainly, like I said, drop us an email and let us know. I did mention previously there's a few things that are going from these sections to definitions. So a lot of these sections in Maple Street, section 22, the 40R district that was passed, had its own definition section. So we're trying to move those pages out of the bylaw into the definition section. Some of them are applicable to other parts of the bylaw as well, but in doing that, we did come across there's multiple definitions that are either the same or extremely similar. So you might see some changes in the section 40, the definition section, that seem like we're striking things out, but in fact, it's either a combination of combining them from section 22 or just simply adding both, but changing the titles of what they're called. So we have, as just came up with 13 Essex, there's paired house, but then there's multifamily in section 22, but there was also multifamily existing in the definition. So we had to reconcile both of those. So just in case you come across it and it looks a little odd, that would be the reasoning why. Did anybody come across anything right now they want to talk about for those edits?
Not right now for me.
Okay. It's a big section, so obviously as you go through and you want to come back to it, we can. And like I said, we can come back to it in October too. So I'll move forward, but anything that comes up, let me know. This will probably take up the bulk of the rest of the presentation, cluster development. So we did overhaul the existing bylaw almost didn't use much of what was there. I think I talked last time about the need to either make it work better or, I mean, I would say suggesting eliminating it. That's not because I don't like the section or it's not useful. It's just the current bylaw, at least so we've heard from people who have tried to exercise it, either doesn't work or the sites aren't large enough, or there's something that seems to be not quite right with this bylaw, given the land prices in town and the size of the parcels left. So this is an attempt to try and make it work if we're going to have it at all. So it is an overhaul, but one thing we're proposing, at least one of the more main changes, is we're allowing two options. So we're being pretty exclusive about talking about the difference between lotting out these developments into individual lots, as you'd see similar to a normal subdivision, and then not lotting it out, so having either a condominium or homeowners association, which would allow for a lot more flexibility in design for the developer, and particularly given easements, and we were targeting stormwater easements, and particularly because, as I said, the federal permit's changing and we're seeing a lot more drainage easements on these lots as they go forward, which can become an issue depending on the size of the lots that are lotted out going forward. And I know for engineering, it's a lot of review work for them. So if the systems could be put somewhere on site, just in a holistic general location for the whole development, that would result in some better design, at least we think. So I'll run through this. I did some short mock-ups on some sites in town. So to kick this off, I don't need to name these sites. You may know where they are, you may not. This is a site in R3. It's a large parcel. There is a portion of this current site that's owned by the town, but I included it in this design just for the sake of having it up there. So this would show just an attempt at a conventional subdivision. It wouldn't have to look like this. This was just my first crack at it, just to give you an idea of, this is a roughly 10-acre site on what it could look like as a conventional subdivision. Those are just some model houses I threw on there. They're not anything special and have no significance. So it results in 12 lots as it is, and the road actually complies, and I think it's short of the dead end standard too. So it was a waiverless conventional subdivision. Under the proposal that we're putting forward, if this went forward as a cluster that chose to lot out the lots, it could look something similar like this. So we allow for a shrinking of the lots in exchange for a significant portion of the site being open space. One of the things we added, you're probably wondering what the yellow circles are. We're going to add a requirement. There's an existing requirement for a 75-foot diameter circle to be included somewhere on the lot to basically make the lots more regular. We want to include that to be tangent at the road. I think the intent was to have it basically regulate frontage of a size to be usable and not create flag lots. So we wanted to be pretty explicit and say that needs to be tangent, meaning abutting the right of way. So this picture is just showing you same number of lots, no density increase or anything, just a large chunk of the site being conserved as open space. Another thing to note is we added a buffering requirement that's significantly larger than what currently exists. So under state law, the cluster development only says the lots need to be separated from all existing properties. It doesn't say by how much or what should be included. So we're proposing 25-foot buffer of a fairly heavy vegetated screen. So in theory, that it's a large site, so that green strip around the outside looks pretty small, but that's actually 25 feet wide. And Georgia Pendergast, the planner in my office, came up with some pretty good vegetative standards to put into the zoning regulations on what should be included in that strip. So moving forward, this is a mock-up of what could potentially happen in a homeowner type development. So not dissimilar, but one thing you'll notice is from this design, there's a large chunk of gray that depicts the right-of-way. So this is full right-of-way, not just what the actual size of the road is. If they wanted to have a homeowners association, technically there wouldn't need to be a right-of-way because the town wouldn't be accepting the road. So this would be privately owned and maintained, but you wouldn't have to have that boundary restriction. So this road still has 12-foot travel lanes. It would be compliant, hopefully, with what the fire department wants. But again, no bonus, just a large increase, 50% of the site being converted to open space from the conventional subdivision. And then walking through this bylaw change here, we did add a provision for a density bonus. Again, as Aaron mentioned, we wanted to keep it broad. If during this drafting it comes down or gets changed, that's okay. Just wanted to show you what the density bonus would look like, in case you were wondering, at a mock-up. So this adds 2 additional units to the site. And again, there's special permit criteria for those. So the overall project would need to come in as a special permit, and then there's another special permit to be asked for additional density. So I'll just move along. We did a few other sites. I did a mock-up of, obviously this is Whipple Hill that you're all fairly familiar with. So this is the definitive plan that was submitted and approved. I did find in our files there was a cluster submitted. So there's that. I did go off of this plan for our version of the lotted out plan. So one thing to note on this one, from this plan submitted, that road B that's shown, we were able to bring that back and eliminate 300 feet of right-of-way, so make it quite a bit shorter. And again, saving some more open space, particularly on the portion of the site that you'll probably know that abuts the existing cemetery. So in this version, the lots were pretty tight up against the cemetery, and then this they'd be significantly further away, and significantly further away from actually the town's open space and Selectman Clark's property. So going forward, this is another mock-up of not the lotted out plan, but the homeowners association design. So again, on this, it allows for more flexibility in the roadway design, but also where the structures are placed. So again, this was just my attempt. They don't have to be in this configuration, and this could be completely different. It was just something that could happen on this site if a homeowners association type development would go forward. But again, 50% of the site converted to open space with a much larger landscaping buffer around the outside of the perimeter, buffering from the neighbors than would exist under the current bylaw. And then the next slide, this is where it gets a little odd, in that the density bonus on this, again, they're completely subjective criteria. It would bump the unit count from 20 to 27, but again, it's completely subjective. So kind of like what has happened over the last couple of weeks with the Essex Street project, it's at the discretion of the board. So if 27 wasn't the right number and it's 20, that's fine. If it's 21, that's okay too. The applicant has to demonstrate to you why they think they should get this. And if the board doesn't agree, then so be it. We just wanted to give, again, as we said before, more options as opposed to the current cluster section. So these were both larger sites. We did look at, this is the last one, I promise. We did look at smaller sites. This is a small 4-acre site. It's kind of tucked away. It would result, if you did it conventionally, in a 5-unit development. But it still works. I just wanted to see if the bylaw would work on a smaller site. So this gets converted into the lotted out subdivision development, which is still 5 lots, still a lot of open space saved, and a lot of buffering from the surrounding neighborhood. And again, if this were a homeowners association, it could look more like this. Again, not exactly like that, but just showing it without lots and what would be achievable. So more open space saved, and still the same buffering from the existing neighborhood. Again, similar, this is with the special permit option. I won't spend too much time on that. I think you're getting the general idea. I did want to go through and show some images of things that are more similar to what I'm talking about currently. So this is a site in Concord. On the left, you'll see the larger parcel with a cluster of houses around what's called Black Horse Place. So it's a 15.8 acre site. So again, it's a large site, but resulted in a cluster of homes that you can see on the right-hand side that, fairly nice homes. I wouldn't mind having one myself, but did result in a lot of open space saved on that site. Again, this is in a more coastal community. These are a different flavor than the ones I just showed you. So these are still very, very large, fairly expensive homes, as you can see from the bottom image, but they still managed to save those large fields along the waterfront there, as well as a significant portion of the salt marsh and some communal gardening area, and kind of keep the houses tight up to the road. And the last one is another type development that was more about saving agriculture, and it's kind of keeping in line with the historic character of the structures in the surrounding neighborhood. So this development has a significant number of parking stalls and barns, as well as historic looking homes. They're not historic, but they were designed to look that way. And there's a trail network in there and a large field saved at the front. So more in line with what we're talking about. And that's it for that. Is there any questions on this section? I know that was a lot.
So, David, I mean, just an observation. I mean, we had two recently, or at least during my tenure. One, the neighborhood really didn't support the cluster, and the other one where the developer didn't like the ultimate design of a cluster and didn't move forward. So, I think part of this is convincing the public in the neighborhood that these cluster developments are good things. Right, and at least on Whipple Hill, one of the comments, at least by one of the abutters, if I remember, I think she worked in the Beverly Planning Department. They had as part of the process, they had to submit 2 potential clusters, just not one plan. So I don't know if that would have made a difference, but getting neighborhood support, I think, is going to be one of the challenges, right?
Sure, yeah, and we were kind of cognizant of that as we were drafting. As I mentioned a couple times, with a lot of these, we're really trying to screen and buffer as much as possible. That way, if for some reason somebody doesn't like the look or the appearance of closeness of the homes, it would at least be screened from view and most likely wouldn't be seen. So that was one of the aspects we were targeting.
Okay.
But yeah, duly noted. Thank you.
I just had some questions, David. Can you go back to the first slide, the McGilvery property?
Yep.
Yeah, it's
Oh, do you want
second
me?
one.
Yep, this one.
Yeah, I live right there, obviously. When we had our land use planning meeting, I made a comment that, I think Aaron kind of called out the Whipple and the Maple Street subdivision, saying that essentially ZBA and perhaps the planning board and Concom allowed these sites to have, I think he said that Whipple should have had no lots and Maple Street should have only had 2. Maple Street ended up with 8 and Whipple ended up with 20. So now you're taking potential on North Street there, which right now I believe is they're marketing it as the house, as a lot, I think, the barn, and then maybe 3 other lots. So you're going from 5 lots to what you're proposing here, which is a much bigger density, albeit saving some green area because there is some wetlands in the back right side there that you have to deal with. But I'm trying to get the philosophy here. In 1 minute, we're kind of downing these larger developments that came in, and now we're having a cluster to encourage that, density in a Residence 3 area where the minimum lot size is 30,000 square feet. So I'm not understanding the overall philosophy or the message, and I can just tell you from experience on the board, the problems that I've seen, not only in Danvers, but in other towns, when you set up a homeowners association, you leave it to the homeowners to deal with it, they're not going to deal with it. They're not going to take care of it. As we saw in Ashley Lane, you had a homeowners association deal with the maintenance of either retention or detention pond, I can't remember which. They did nothing. It got clogged up, and they had to turn over the town the maintenance of that. I think they paid 90 grand or something like that to the town for that pleasure for perpetuity. So I think part of the problems with these homeowners associations is no one's keeping track of who's paying dues. People move. Who's in charge of it? Are they going to do the maintenance twice a year? Because you're not going to have a cluster unless you have wetlands. Because that's the reason why you're having the cluster. Preserve, for the most part, to preserve some of this land. You end up with these bowling alley lots, like you see at Coat Farm. Not so much on Morgan Drive, but I think that's part of the problem. But I'm trying to get the philosophy down. Are we encouraging more development or less development? I guess from the get-go with some of these things, because coming from that last meeting that we had with all the different boards, it sounded like we were going to add more regulation, go through our regulations, deal with this. But when I see this, that seems to me like you're encouraging more density.
Well,
I think on this one, I mean, sorry, just to jump in there, on the specific design of it, like I said, there is a chunk of town-owned land in the front, so I just included it in this. And there are some wetlands, so this doesn't take into account at all any environmental restrictions. It was just, I don't have that information. And nobody's delineated that, so we don't have it. But this was just the raw shape and size of the land. So this is current R3 zoning. It results in 12 units. So then the cluster would also result in 12 units. So again, with that town-owned parcel, I think they're marketing it as 6 A&R lots, and I've gotten calls for 10 lots if they obviously do a subdivision and build the road. But again, with including that town-owned parcel, that kind of changes things a little bit. It's only a sliver, but it gives more access into the site a little bit more. So there's no, like I said, there's no increased density at all between what would be possible on this mock-up to the cluster. There's an option in there, like I said, to add more density by a special permit, but that's just out there. If the board does not want to include that in the proposal going forward, they definitely don't have to. It's just, we included it to include a broad list of options. If things get cut, then things get cut as we go along. So same number of lots, there's no additional density offered just by going cluster. And you'd still have to provide as part of the plan set, one of the things we include, you still have to provide a yield plan to show what would be possible under the conventional development. So this isn't giving any buildability at all that otherwise wouldn't already exist under this scenario. So for this purpose, the conventional and the cluster yield the same, and you'd have to demonstrate buildability to even do the cluster. That's just part of the application process. I didn't want to jump on in Aaron's philosophy. He's here. He can talk about that if he feels.
Well, and I think, thank you, David. And I think on what I was trying to convey at the Land Use Summit on the 22nd of August was, I think that the town needs to do a better job, and that's staff, that's some of the boards and commissions of understanding the relationship between left hand and right hand in what we're doing, where I think you see a lot of applicants go to the ZBA for a seemingly innocuous permission to do something, but in reality that turns into something by right. It's granting them a by right something when they come to the planning board next. And I picked on those ones only because I think, again, they happen to be recent, happen to have some files that we could accurately make those assessments. So not trying to be schizophrenic, I think what we're trying to do is understand that with certain types of developments, and particularly greenfield conventional development, I think the town should be more judicious with what it's doing and more intentional about those projects. They're still going to happen. There are still plenty of opportunities. As I said, I think conventional development in this town could continue for another 5 decades under the existing rules, and we're not proposing to change that. I think what I was trying to say is that I'm not sure, knowing that, why we sometimes would seemingly convey additional buildability into those projects when we already know we have plenty of those out there. Now, looking at something like this and how that fits in there, it's again, if that property is going to be developed, should there be an alternative that might be slightly less invasive or jarring for those around it? I mean, this particular site could be any, has a nice vista, has that field, and that might be something worth preserving if you're going to get 12 units either way, or 10 or 7, whatever it ends up, the actual yield ends up being on a given site. Maybe there's another configuration that might be better, or the lesser of two evils. I don't want to characterize all development as poor, but I'm getting at is that this plan, for instance, might be more beneficial and more acceptable to the neighborhood than the conventional. So just trying to lay out that I think we need to be a little bit more intentional when we go into these processes and what applicants are really striving to do. And then I think conversely, we need to have a book that provides some options to blunt some projects when it's appropriate to look at something else or a softer version of it. So, not a great answer, but my attempt.
What do you think about the homeowners association concept? In your experience with Lexington,
There's
Danvers.
always, you're not wrong. Homeowners association, condo associations, governance issues as they mature tend to be difficult to navigate. That said, I don't believe under state law, the town, I guess in this bylaw, you could imply that we're encouraging it. I think it's more that it's a recognition that type of ownership is not something municipalities can regulate through the process. And there will be times when developers will propose substandard roads or something about the development that the public doesn't want to end up having to own at the end of the day. And I think having a process to account for that is all we're trying to lay out here. Again, as David said, if that's something we don't want to encourage, or you feel that this encourages that and you don't want to do that, we can cut that out or make amendments to it. So, but I agree. Usually the first generation of these developments is no problem. It's usually the second and third owners that don't remember the specifics of exactly why it is the way it is. And then they call us, the municipality, 10 years on and say, why don't we get trash picked up in front of our curb like everybody else? Or something, or why aren't you plowing our street fast enough? Things like of that nature. So they're problematic.
Okay.
Yep. I guess to chime in on that, I would say that to answer Jim's question, to follow up on Aaron's, I wouldn't say I completely agree with him. I think the entire time that I was in the town of Lexington, we almost exclusively only permitted these type of developments. We had 2 conventionals out of, I'd say, 40 overall developments. So they seem to work, but that's open for discussion. And if the board doesn't like the specifics of what's being proposed at the time, obviously, you're free to deny any and all discretionary permits as you see fit. So just for what it's worth. Any other questions on this one?
Nope.
Does the town, as a result of Ashley Lane, I think the town took over, that was specifically a detention or retention area that caused major problems. It was a mess. And I think the town decided to take over the maintenance of all of those, didn't they, Jim? Didn't they decide that they would take that away from homeowners associations and they would be responsible?
That particular one, I think they had to pay the town like 90 grand or something to service it in perpetuity.
I thought the town did the other ones. I've lived in 2 condominiums which have homeowners associations, and we've never had a problem.
Those are different. Those are condo associations because that's the type of ownership you have.
That's true.
A homeowners association that's set up to deal with either a retention or detention pond, or if you've got maintenance issues like if the town doesn't accept the street, you got to do your own private trash, private snow removal, private street lighting. If you have tennis courts or all that, that's where you see that type of thing. But I don't know.
Jim,
My experience as a real estate attorney, you try tracking someone down if they're selling their house on this cluster development to see if they paid their. Who's going to tell me if they paid their annual dues or not? Who's the association captain? None of that's recorded, so it's not like getting a 6D certificate from a condo association. It's different. It's Wild West.
So Jim, I
guess I
what
could
we're hearing is there's a difference between the homeowners association and the condo association.
Yeah, and I guess
David and I can deal with that off on the side.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, for the sake of, if I misspoke, I was using homeowners association just to depict a style of development. It could be a condo association, it could be any type of other organization. It's not, we can't specify ownership, so I guess I was just using homeowners.
Well, I had a concern. We've had a number of subdivisions, I think subdivisions that have gone through where they have cul-de-sacs, and you can correct me if I'm right, Jim, and the cul-de-sac would be assigned to one specific property owner at the end of the street. Do you remember those?
Yeah, we had.
You know what's funny? I just went down the one off of Locust Street where DiBiase built.
Yeah.
It's called Holly Lane.
Mm-hmm.
If you go into Connor's Farm, drive down there and take a look at it. Grass is probably 2 feet high. It looks awful.
Yeah.
Absolutely atrocious. drive down there on your way to Connors Farm to get your pumpkin. I'm telling you, we drove by to look at the houses. It looks awful.
Well, I always had a concern when we did that. I mean, we would put that in the condition that certain house would be responsible, and I did have a concern.
Well, that was like the flagpole at Ironwood. You know, you got to do the flagpole. It's your week to mow the lawn. I mean, but people aren't going to do it, especially like that particular one. It's this huge island in the middle of this cul-de-sac. It's got probably a detention area in there. It looks like it looks atrocious.
Okay.
Absolutely horrible.
I'll take a look, but I believe you. I believe you.
Believe me, I was blown away by it. I mean, you've got nice homes, and they're looking at this pit, and the grass is not mowed, and it's just it's horrible.
Shame on someone for not going out and doing it. Goodness.
Oh, we don't know if it's being maintained. How do you know? How do you know if it's being maintained? If it's being dug out, that's a Concom.
Yeah, that's true. I agree. I agree there are problems, and over the years we've had to deal with things like that. But this is a good start. I like your cluster.
Yep.
Okay.
I just had a question, just in terms of David, just for the. I think you mentioned a few minutes ago about the about sort of how things are done in Beverly in terms of that it's required to do to provide a cluster alternative if you're doing conventional. Could you sort of hum a few bars about that?
I don't think I brought that up. That is the case in a few communities. However,
oh, that's right. I'm sorry, John may mention.
Yeah, I mentioned that. I mean, that was one of the feedback by one of the abutters.
Okay. Yeah, that some towns do still have that provision. I'm pretty sure, I'm 95% positive that was struck down by the courts as an illegal practice. They can't require you to submit another design. If you want to do a conventional, they can't force you to submit something else.
Okay. Got it. Thanks.
But again, I know it's still on the books in a few communities, so.
Okay.
Thanks. So David, I'm sensitive of the time. It's 10 o'clock. Sure. So can we move this section on to the next meeting? Or is there something you wanted to kind of close for us for our consideration?
No, like I said, I mean, we knew we had kind of a stacked deck, so I was looking at this. If we can go as far as we want to go at this point. So the hearings are open. They'll all be continued unless you choose to close them this evening to the first meeting in October. But just so you're all aware, our October meetings are looking a lot lighter. So that may be more appropriate to discuss further at those meetings, if that's how the board feels.
I mean, personally, that's how I'd like to try to do it. That's why I was going to ask you, what's the agenda look like? If it's light, then we can spend a lot more time on this.
Yeah, they're pretty light. We tried to keep this agenda open, but got stacked up.
Okay.
John, David, do you have could we fly through? Is there like 2 more slides, 5 more? I mean, is it possible to bust through just so that everything is at least on the table? I know obviously the board's going to want to do some homework and reach out to us with all kinds of questions in between now and the next meeting, but can we just touch on the other 2 articles that are left or no?
If you'd like, Mr. Chair, I can literally just address them in 1 or 2 lines and we can.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure.
Put them all on the table then.
Sure. So I've been talking quite a bit about changes to definitions, section 40. I don't think I need to harp on that. Again, it's adding definitions that may have been missing and removing duplicate items and moving Maple Street definitions to 40. Keeping of animals, I'm pretty sure you're all familiar with it. Came about from the goat situation. We tried to get this through last spring town meeting, but obviously due to COVID, it's now pushed to the fall, but no changes except we're adding beekeeping to the definition, so adding apiaries. Civic and open space is one we're going to have to spend more time on next time, but effectively it would be designating municipally owned land and other institutional land as a civic and or open space district. I'll leave that at that because this one's a lot more detailed, I think, than I can go into now.
Agree.
And then we have 2 owners petitions, just so you're aware, one submitted by MassDOT. So that was in your packet. They want to designate a portion of the right-of-way, which they own because it's MassDOT, to highway corridor zone. And then 3 parcels on what's being known as Outer Maple Street would like to convert to C1. I think that's also in your packet, but we can talk about those more next time. And that's it. That was the quick wrap up.
Okay, that makes sense. So, I mean, so why don't we, we'll continue to read it and then we'll pick it up at the next meeting.
Sure.
So,
Just on the last slide there, my only question I had is, how is that not spot zoning?
Either of them or one specific?
Either one.
I guess I would answer it in the way that we've been answering questions like that, is that contract zoning, I don't believe is a thing anymore under state law. So if town meeting votes on it, technically it's got the consent of town meeting. So it wasn't due to a contract or some other negotiated form. I don't know if Aaron wants to add more on that.
Yeah, no, I think there's a leading court case out of Bellingham where basically the owner always, under state law, you always have the right as a property owner to request of town meeting to rezone or zone your property at your request. There was a case probably about 10 years ago now out of Bellingham that basically their charges were of spot zoning. The power company that was seeking to build basically said, if you give us this zoning, we'll give you $1 million. And a number of abutters challenged and said that has to be spot zoning or contract zoning, as it tends to actually be once you get into the court system. And the court said there was no collusion. Spot zoning is you and the mayor make a deal behind the scenes that no one knows about, and your public-facing discussions of it are about X, Y, and Z, when in reality it was about something else. In this case in Bellingham, no, there was no quid pro quo. Well, there was an open quid pro quo, which as part of the public process was deemed acceptable. So in this particular case, as everything is on the up and up, and there's no, everyone's privy to all information available. I doubt that this would fall under that. It's a popular charge to levy against, small corrections to the zoning map, but for better or for worse in Massachusetts, spot zoning, contract zoning is all but dead, provided you go through a legitimate public process. And again, in a city where you have city council voting as your legislative body, you can still have, and you will still hear about issues of small councils running into problems. But in the town meeting setting and the way that works, there have been very few charges of spot zoning or contract zoning that have stuck. And that Bellingham case really put the nail in the coffin, provided you go through a legitimate public process in front of town meeting.
Okay, so I guess, so we'll continue on at the next meeting with the proposed zoning amendments. The final item on the agenda is we have a couple minutes that need to be approved or discussed. The first one is the August 11th, 2020 minutes. Is there a motion to accept these minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay.
Was any discussion on the minutes? This one was kind of a lengthy meeting, the August 11th one. Does everyone feel that is the minutes in good shape? I felt they were. But I just want to make sure that everyone had a chance to be comfortable with these minutes. Okay, hearing no concerns, why don't we do a roll call vote to accept them? Jim?
Accept.
Peg?
Yes.
Lou?
Yes.
And Tori?
Yes.
And I'm in favor as well. So the motion carries. The last one was the meeting of September 8th. This was kind of a shorter meeting. Is there a motion to accept the minutes as drafted?
Mr. Chair?
Yep.
Just really quick, sorry, I had a staff edit on that. I left a hanging ellipse in there. I was going to go back and add the list of waivers for 54 Cherry Hill Drive. I missed it, and it ended up in the packet as basically a blank space. So if you do accept, I would say with the condition that the list of waivers Mrs. Zelinski requested would be added in.
I mean, I like that idea with that amendment. Is there a motion with the correction that David just highlighted?
I move that we approve the September 8th minutes with the conditions that to be added that David just spoke about.
Great. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we'll do the roll call vote. Jim?
Aye, yes.
Yeah. Peg?
Yes.
Lou?
Yes.
Lori?
Yes.
And I'm in favor as well. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
We'll do a voice vote on this one. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Have a good night. Thanks, everyone.
Hello.
Night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.